Hello everyone. We hope you're doing well. We're doing great, and we truly appreciate your ongoing support. We'd like to briefly address some comments regarding our audiobook series. Rest assured, progress is ongoing. That said, your feedback is vital. If there's a novel you particularly enjoy and want to hear more of, please let us know in the comments. Each chapter requires a financial investment, so we can only continue series that receive strong audience interest. Although we retain core names and plot lines, we make significant editorial changes to enhance clarity, pacing, and immersion. These are not simple recitations. We work hard to deliver a polished, thoughtful listening experience. Without sufficient feedback or engagement, we may need to discontinue a series. So if you're enjoying something, don't stay silent. Your input truly matters. Note, our default audio speed is 3x. If that's too fast, let us know. We're happy to adjust it. Interested in early access to unreleased audiobooks? Visit our Patreon. You'll get to experience new content before it reaches YouTube. Just to clarify, I'm a fan like you. I've purchased these novels and adapted them with care, while respecting all rights and guidelines. For updates, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, X. YouTube update: recently, YouTube flagged some of our content for including mature themes, realistic violence, and darker story elements. As a result, we've decided to stop uploading anything that violates YouTube's guidelines. If you'd like access to the full, uncut versions including the more intense or mature content, you can find them on our Patreon page, where we upload everything first. Available now on Patreon: Shattered Innocence transmigrated into a novel as an extra. Transmigrating over 10,000 years late, I was forced to become a mighty presence. I, the celestial dragon, rule the heavens through the double gate, reigning supreme in countless worlds with beast taming, Tower of God sequence strength, cultivation when you take things to the extreme. Naruto is an Uchiha with cyst. WTF, the centuries-old ancestor in our family take concubine again. Plus 18, Ichi, reincarnated in Bleach as a wizard. Thanks for listening and happy listening. And why do you think that? His fascination with Masatsuki only deepened. Their views on the Soul King align far too well. If I remember correctly, the Soul King possesses omniscience and omnipotence. How could he not have foreseen the Tsunayashiro clan's betrayal? Masatsuki chuckled mockingly. He allowed it to happen. That's the only reason their ancestors succeeded in sealing him away. It was his choice. There's nothing to pity. You're absolutely right, Aizen murmured. Everyone must take responsibility for their own choices. Masatsuki leaned against a glass wall, arms crossed. So, what the jewel is missing? Is the power scattered from the Soul King? Precisely. The Soul King's fragments are scattered throughout the world, Aizen confirmed. I've discovered traces of them within certain souls. These fragments are the foundation for completing the Hogyoku. Masatsuki glanced around before casually asking, so, do you already have a way to locate these fragments? Aizen chuckled. You could say that. Masatsuki Ozaki tensed up instantly at Aizen's words, but the latter continued as if he hadn't noticed. Do you remember what I said? The Tsunayashiro clan wants to create a king they can control? They're not just thinking about it, they're already taking action. The Tsunayashiro clan is attempting to gather fragments of the Soul King to create a weaker version of him. To achieve this, they have spent years researching and have finally identified a group in the world of the living known as the Fullbringers. Fullbringers are superhumans who can extract the souls from objects and enhance them with their own spiritual power. This ability comes from the fragments of the Soul King within them. Our next target is them. Huh? Masatsuki Ozaki scoffed impatiently. You can't be serious. Do you have any idea how many people live in the world of the living? Even if they have supernatural abilities, trying to find them is like searching for a needle in a haystack. No, you don't need to concern yourself with the Fullbringers in the world of the living. I'll handle that investigation personally when the time comes. Aizen shook his head. Your task is to watch for Shinigami and Siriite AI who possess special abilities. Soul King fragments don't only appear in humans. The fragments we've recovered before were found in both Shinigami and Rukongai residents. The chances of finding fragments within the souls in Soul Society are low, but not impossible. You work in the second division. The Onmitsukido's influence extends throughout Siriite AI? That makes you the most suitable person for this task. But I'm just a glorified prison guard, Masatsuki Ozaki said, feigning a miserable expression in an attempt to back out. Aizen smirked coldly. Don't think I'm unaware of your relationship with Captain Shioin. Masatsuki Ozaki raised an eyebrow. Didn't take you for someone interested in gossip. Aizen chuckled. I don't need to pay special attention. With the way you and Shioin run rampant in Siriite AI, there's hardly anyone who doesn't know about the black and white duo. I have a nickname now? Masatsuki muttered, glancing down at his hands and pulling his collar slightly to inspect his chest. Pretty pale. Guess your Uchiha's the black one. Fine, since it's for our future, I'll handle this. Just don't forget your end of the deal. Naturally. Aizen gave a small nod before turning his gaze to the large Hershey-based computer. All data on the experimental souls is stored there. I'll grant you access, feel free to look through it. You might find something useful for your task. Masatsuki Ozaki walked over to the computer, fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced ease. Suddenly, a familiar figure appeared on the screen, but he couldn't recall where he had seen them before. This guy looks familiar. Aizen narrowed his eyes at the display and sneered. That was a freshman from Shino Academy last year. If I recall correctly, he was in your class. He had remarkable potential, and a Soul King fragment within him. His existence was invaluable to my research. The screen flickered, and a slideshow of soul data began playing. Many of the faces were unfamiliar to Masatsuki. Some, however, he had seen before, souls he had personally extracted. Their expressions were twisted in agony, their furious gazes seeming to pierce through the screen, as if demanding vengeance, trying to drag him down to hell with them. Masatsuki Ozaki remained impassive, flipping through the records without hesitation, ignoring the sorrow and rage etched onto their faces. He had long accepted the path he walked, a road paved with blood, leading toward a throne built upon bones. Aizen stood beside him, silently watching both Masatsuki and the massive display, lost in his own thoughts. Perhaps, in that moment, he too recalled the countless acts he had committed over the years. But like Masatsuki, his heart remained still, neither sorrowful nor joyful. Just then, the sound of footsteps echoed from the metal floor outside, a rhythmic click, 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 reminiscent of an ancient clock ticking. As the unseen clock's hand seemingly came to a stop, the laboratory door slid open. A man with tan skin, clad in a shiakusho, his naturally wavy purple hair cut to shoulder length, stepped inside. Tosen. Aizen turned his head. Aizen-sama, the brown-haired man responded. Chapter 67, Laboratory. In the dimly lit laboratory, the only source of light was the faint glow from the computer screen, just enough to illuminate the three figures, two light-skinned and one dark. But light held no meaning for Kaname Tosen. His pale, sightless eyes perceived only endless darkness. All he could do was slightly twitch his ears, discerning the presence of a third person by the rhythm of their breathing. The concealment skills of this third person were extraordinary. Despite their proximity, their spiritual pressure was completely undetectable. This should be our first official meeting, shouldn't it, Kaname Tosen? Masatsuki Ozaki spoke warmly, standing in front of the screen without the slightest intention of moving, his fingers tapping rapidly against the keyboard. Let me introduce myself. I'm Masatsuki Ozaki. From now on, we'll be comrades fighting side by side. Tosen ignored him entirely, walking straight to Aizen and handing over a glass container. Aizen-sama, this is today's harvest. Aizen took the container and smirked as he gazed at the soul inside. This will be the last time. We won't need these anymore, we have a new target. Go on, Kaname, introduce yourself to Masatsuki. Yes, Aizen-sama. Only after Aizen's instruction did Kaname Tosen turn to Masatsuki Ozaki. I am Kaname Tosen. Pleased to make your acquaintance. Likewise. Masatsuki Ozaki didn't take offense to his earlier indifference, he couldn't care less what Tosen was thinking. Kaname Tosen had lost his closest friend, Keikyo, and afterward, he had been deceived and manipulated by Tokunada Tsunayashiro, the very murderer responsible. Left in utter despair, he had become consumed by rage and hatred. Aizen sought to change Soul Society, and so Tosen had chosen to follow him, aiming to dismantle the darkness of this world. But at his core, he was nothing more than a husk propelled by hatred, unable to truly grasp his own identity. Masatsuki Ozaki clapped his hands together and chuckled. Well, I'm done looking through the data. I'll be heading out first, Aizen-sama. Go ahead, Masatsuki. Aizen nodded. Rest assured, everything has been taken care of. With his back to Aizen, Masatsuki waved a hand dismissively as he walked out the door. As the laboratory doors sealed shut, Kaname Tosen finally spoke. Can that man really be trusted? Aizen narrowed his eyes slightly before answering with confidence. He won't be content to remain just a Shinigami. As long as that ambition burns within him, he will stay by my side. Masatsuki Ozaki strolled leisurely through the bustling streets, taking in the lively atmosphere as he slowly made his way toward the nest of maggots. That night, after spending the entire day idling about, Masatsuki finally arrived at the nest of maggots. As he pushed open the door, it was clear that the prisoners had already become familiar with their new overseer. All of them shrank back into the corners, too afraid to move. But that was only temporary. It wouldn't be long before the isolation wore down their minds, numbing them to fear. Once that happened, they would start throwing punches at him again. Is the modification complete? Masatsuki stood at the top of the stairs, arms crossed as he leaned casually against the wall. The prisoners behind him glanced at his defenseless back, hesitated for a moment, then lowered their heads. Pretty much done. Just need to get this thing inside. Standing before him, Jinakamaru cradled a device in his arms. It looked like a compact computer. Aren't you being a little too nice to that lunatic? Don't tell me you actually have a soft spot for scientists? Masatsuki nodded before glancing past the staircase. He spotted a shadow cast on the ground and suddenly smirked. The owner of the shadow wore peculiar earrings, distorting the reflection so that their silhouette had triangular-shaped ears. Noticing his gaze, Jinakamaru chuckled dryly. That guy really is crazy. I have no idea what's going through his head, getting attached to that ridiculous getup. Well, geniuses tend to be a bit eccentric, that's just how it is. Masatsuki Ozaki chuckled. Of the three geniuses he knew, including Mayuri Kurotsuchi, none of them were remotely normal. Mayuri was, of course, a mad scientist. Kusagakure, on the other hand, was a man who loved to toy with others and shirk responsibilities whenever possible. Despite his youth, he had the demeanor of a jaded middle-aged man. Yet at times, he could be frighteningly sharp, his contradictions making one question his sanity. And Aizen? No need to even mention him, his lofty ideals were absurdly grand. He wanted to overthrow Soul Society's outdated system and build a new, more just order. But between the three of them, Kusagakure, for all his quirks, was ironically the most like a normal person. Maybe. You should go keep an eye on him? Jinakamaru had a hesitant expression, clearly debating whether to say it aloud. In the end, he couldn't hold back and voiced his concern. There were plenty of traps set up in the room, but he was still uneasy. That guy, Mayuri Kurotsuchi, was insane, but undeniably intelligent. Precisely because he's intelligent, he knows what to do. Don't underestimate him. Yes, he's a madman, but he's a rational madman. Masatsuki Ozaki lifted his gaze from the ground and spoke casually. As long as he doesn't go overboard, just let him be. Jinakamaru remained silent for a moment before sighing helplessly. This guy was always so confident. Jin honestly couldn't tell whether Masatsuki could truly see through people's hearts or if he was simply too self-assured in his own judgment. But the fact remained, Masatsuki's instincts had never been wrong. It was as if everything naturally fell into place for him. Nice to see you again, Kurotsuchi-san. Just as Jin was lost in thought, Masatsuki Ozaki's calm voice rang through the room. Mayuri Kurotsuchi didn't even lift his head, hunched over the table, tinkering with something. Masatsuki Ozaki stepped inside, scanning the room. The cell had changed drastically. The space had expanded, and nearly half of it had been converted into a makeshift laboratory. Where there was once only a single bed, the room was now cluttered with simple lab equipment. Surveillance bugs had been installed along the walls. These creatures, with their grotesque faces and numerous legs, clung to the corners of the room, transmitting both sound and images, functioning much like monitors. You don't actually think those little things will work on me, do you? Mayuri suddenly spoke in a gruff voice. Well, Kusuk made them. Say what you will, but his technology is top-notch. I trust his craftsmanship. Masatsuki Ozaki spread his hands, then pulled up a chair and sat down in front of him. And I trust that your intellect won't allow you to act like a fool. Oh? So I should be grateful for your faith in me? Mayuri Kurotsuchi let out a sneer and curled his lips in disdain. You and Kusagakure really are insufferable. It's quite rude to refer to someone as just a you, Kurotsuchi-san. Masatsuki Ozaki spoke in an even tone, his eyes narrowing slightly as he smiled. What a nasty piece of work. Mayuri's eye twitched slightly, but he said nothing, standing up and walking toward the bed. If he had the strength, he would have already made a move. Masatsuki Ozaki followed him closely. Mayuri pressed his hand against a section of the wall by the bed. A flash of white light streaked across the surface, and without warning, a hidden panel slid away, revealing the secret laboratory concealed behind it. Chapter 68, Battlefield of Carnage? You truly live up to your reputation, Mayuri Kurotsuchi, the most dangerous prisoner in the nest of maggots, not because of brute strength, but because of sheer intellect. Masatsuki Ozaki's eyes gleamed with admiration as he couldn't help but voice his appreciation. Jinakamaru nodded in agreement. He hadn't set up this mechanism, his role was only to deliver the equipment. Which meant that Mayuri Kurotsuchi had built this hidden device in just half a day. It's just a simple projection, nothing too complex, Mayuri remarked, sitting cross-legged on the bed. The chains attached to his shackles clinked softly. It only works on those too afraid to enter this room. For you, standing here with me, it's completely useless. Masatsuki Ozaki reached out and touched the wall, watching as his palm passed straight through. As expected, just an illusion. Still, the fact that Mayuri could create something like this with such crude equipment in such a short time spoke volumes about his brilliance. If I could recruit him and gain control over his knowledge and technology, he would be an invaluable asset. Unfortunately, this man is unstable, a double-edged sword. I might be able to control and utilize him, but making him truly submit? Impossible. Just then. Tap. 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 A sudden knocking sound broke the silence. Mayuri Kurotsuchi, you haven't forgotten our deal, have you? Masatsuki Ozaki tapped the stone bed with one hand while absent-mindedly stroking his chin with the other. I've held up my end of the bargain. I trust you haven't forgotten what I asked for? Mayuri Kurotsuchi hesitated for a moment before sighing and pulling out a slip of paper. Masatsuki Ozaki took it and glanced at it, an address and a string of numbers. Go find it. I've backed up all my research and data there. Everything I promised you is waiting, Mayuri said, his voice trembling slightly. Handing over his life's work like this, it was impossible not to feel some reluctance. Mayuri Kurotsuchi, there's no need for regret. When the day comes that you walk free and see the light again, you'll be thanking me, Masatsuki Ozaki said. Leaning against a wall, Mayuri clenched his fists tightly, his trousers bunching up into intricate folds, like winding roads converging into a labyrinth. He stared at Masatsuki's composed face and, after a moment, let out a quiet breath, smoothing out his clothes. I'll be waiting for that day. Mayuri murmured. The past was set in stone, what mattered now was the future. This makeshift laboratory was nothing more than a distraction. If he wanted to continue the research he had abandoned a century ago, he would have to escape this place. Be patient. You won't be disappointed, Masatsuki Ozaki assured him. After all, I don't want your talents wasted here either. There are far more important things waiting for you out there. Masatsuki Ozaki smiled, clapping Mayuri on the shoulder before turning to leave. He stepped out of the cell and ascended the long staircase, illuminated by the glow of torches. Mayuri Kurotsuchi looked up, watching as his silhouette disappeared into the light. The prisoners remained huddled in the corners, unmoving, as the heavy dungeon doors creaked open. Outside, the detention unit stood in formation, a wall of shadows guarding every inch of the nest of maggots. The guards bowed their heads respectfully, silently saluting the two high-ranking officers as they departed. Do you need me to go with you? The mad scientist's secret lair might hold unexpected dangers. Jinikamaru spoke casually as he fastened his katana, glancing at Masatsuki Ozaki. Mayuri Kurotsuchi may not be that strong, but he has a certain talent. There's a good chance he set traps in his lab. Of course there are traps, but he told me about all of them. He's not ready to let me die just yet. As he spoke, Masatsuki Ozaki flipped over the note Mayuri Kurotsuchi had given him. The back was filled with dense writing, covering the entire page. You don't need to come with me. This has to be done in secret, the fewer people who know, the better. In that case, go find Ranjaku and tell her I have something to take care of. She should stay home tonight and not wander around. Jinikamaru was silent for a moment before nodding. I'll tell her. Be careful. I'm counting on you. As Jinikamaru walked away, Masatsuki Ozaki withdrew his gaze and lightly ran his fingers over Bansho Senran at his waist. He had Aizen to thank for showing him Kyokusugetsushikai. Without it, the ever-watchful Darasha Kairo would make it impossible to act too openly in Soul Society. But with Kyokusugetsu's ability to deceive the Darasha Kairo, his concerns were significantly reduced. Masatsuki Ozaki looked toward the eastern part of Siriite Ai. The sky was clear, with stars and the moon shining brightly. From the high ground, he could see the scattered lights of the streets and alleys below, twinkling in harmony with the stars above. A hand tapped his shoulder. He turned around to see a vibrant young girl with purple hair twirl in front of him. Masatsuki. Yoruichi, done with work already? Didn't expect you to have time to visit the nest of maggots. Masatsuki Ozaki's face broke into a smile. This energetic girl always had a way of lifting his mood. I barely got through half my workload today before realizing it just wasn't for me, so I dumped the rest on Marinoshin. Yoruichi Shioing crossed her arms, a grin playing on her lips. When I snuck out earlier, one of the squad members mentioned you were inspecting the nest of maggots, so I came to find you. You really like this place, huh? You've only been captain of the detention unit for a few days, and this is already your second visit. It's all because of Mayuri Kurotsuchi. Masatsuki Ozaki sighed. Oh, speaking of Mayuri, Yoruichi clapped her hands. Kisuke sent word today, he said you recruited him. That's right. Masatsuki Ozaki leaned against a tree, meeting Yoruichi's gaze. Not just him, Garyo Hikaifune is on board too. She's going to convince Master to establish the Shinigami Research and Development Institute. You really are popular, Yoruichi sighed. Even Kiryu-san couldn't turn you down. She sat down on the ground, stretching her arms and yawning as she enjoyed the cool mountain breeze. Her gaze drifted through the trees to a shimmering lake in the distance. A small smile tugged at the corners of her lips before she spoke, her tone deliberately casual. Kukaku is doing well, right? I heard you asked Kisuke to make her some protective gear. The moment she finished speaking, she had the sudden urge to slap herself. Seriously? Did she really just say that? When did she start acting so awkward? Masatsuki Ozaki was about to respond but suddenly tensed. His brow furrowed as he sensed something off. On the surface, Yoruichi's words sounded like simple concern for her best friend, but his years of experience navigating life and death situations told him there was something more beneath the surface, something dangerous. Clearing his throat, he spoke carefully. Kukaku and I are close, and she's your best friend too. She spends every day conducting dangerous experiments, it's only natural that you'd be worried about her. I just happened to come up with the idea, so I rushed to Kisuke for help. After all, you two are so close. If something really happened to her, I doubt you'd be fine with it. I'm sorry. That was my mistake, I shouldn't have forced my thoughts onto you. Yoruichi froze at his words, caught off guard. Chapter 69, Don't Disappoint Me. Yoruichi's eyes widened in disbelief as she stared at Masatsuki Ozaki, watching the mix of grievance and self-reproach appear on his face. Her heart trembled for a moment. What? Masatsuki did all this? For me? He went to the 12th Division to find Kisuke for me, had him make a protective suit for me, and now he's even apologizing. All for me? What a load of nonsense. Does he take me for an idiot? Like I don't know what kind of person he is? Yoruichi Shioing felt touched for exactly 1 second before snapping back to reality. She rolled her eyes in frustration. There's no way this guy put that much thought into it. He definitely just couldn't resist Kukaku Shiba's looks, so he went to Kisuke for help. Damn him, he's never even given me a present before. Am I worse than that woman? She glanced down at herself. Just a little shorter, a little less curvy, that's all. I'm not even 200 yet, I'll grow into it. But seriously, what's Kukaku's deal? We're the same age, so how the hell did she end up looking like that? People say the Shiba family has all sorts of secret techniques passed down through generations. Could it be that the thought sent a shiver down her spine. Yoruichi instinctively hugged herself, burying her head as a faint blush crept onto her face. Seeing this, Masatsuki Ozaki assumed his nonsense had actually worked, so he decided to push his luck. Actually, I have a present for you too. Still covering her face with her arm, Yoruichi mumbled, where is it? Masatsuki glanced down and caught sight of her slender neck, adorned with a ribbon tied into a neat bow. In that moment, she looked like a small, vulnerable kitten, and his eyes lit up. It's just a little piece of jewelry, but I haven't finished preparing it yet. Give me some time. Yoruichi's thoughts had long drifted elsewhere, to Jinrenon in the 1st district of West Rukongai, so she didn't press him further and quickly agreed. She then casually said, see you, before dashing off toward the western part of Siriai. Masatsuki Ozaki stared after her, dumbfounded. Why is she so excited? I mean, she's not the kind of person to overreact to a gift. She knows better than that. There's definitely something else going on. Something big. But what? Whatever it was, Masatsuki found his curiosity piqued. The more he wasn't supposed to know, the more he wanted to find out. People are always drawn to the unknown, after all. Masatsuki Ozaki thought it over but still couldn't make sense of it. Rather than dwell on it, he decided to suppress his curiosity for now and ask Yoruichi about it tomorrow. He had more pressing matters to handle. Casting one last glance in the direction Yoruichi had gone, he vanished with flash steps, swiftly heading in the opposite direction. District 76, Sikaon, East Rukongai. Under the cover of night, Masatsuki Ozaki concealed himself in the shadows and sprinted toward the outskirts, where he found a dilapidated house in a small village. He didn't rush in. Mayuri Kurotsuchi had been gone for over a century, yet Masatsuki could sense the presence of living people inside. A faint light flickered through the window, casting blurred silhouettes against the glass. Suppressing his spiritual pressure, he crept closer and peered inside. 5 men sat cross-legged in the room, surrounded by rusted swords. Their clothes were stained with dried blood. They were eating food stolen from who knows where, some of it still had fresh blood on it. More than that, Masatsuki could feel the lingering scent of blood on them. These men had killed plenty of people. It was common in the lower districts. The lawless outskirts were barely livable, food and water were scarce, and killing was often the only means of survival. It was a hellish existence. No wonder they were eating bloodied food. In this place, people became ruthless out of necessity. If they didn't kill, someone else would kill them. Here, there was no distinction between good and evil. Survival was the only rule. Just a bunch of thugs, huh? Masatsuki drew his Zanpakutō. I guess this rundown house is valuable property to them. Ever since he'd left the 6th district, where the 2nd Division's barracks were located, Bansho Senran had remained in Shikai. With an expression of calm indifference, Masatsuki pulled the door open and stepped inside. A Shinigami? Why the hell are you here? The 5 men turned pale. They had killed many people, but an actual Shinigami was a different story. Normally, they'd go out of their way to avoid one. Now, one had walked in armed and ready. It was clear he wasn't here for a friendly visit. Don't worry. This won't take long. Masatsuki pointed Bansho Senran's tip downward. The men's eyes widened in horror as they watched the Shinigami before them shatter like fragile porcelain. In the next instant, agonizing pain ripped through them. Blood splattered across the room as thin, precise wounds appeared on their bodies. The air filled with the sharp scent of iron. You won't die for nothing. A calm voice accompanied the sight of Masatsuki's hand plunging into one of the men's chests. Screams of agony filled the room. Masatsuki watched impassively as he sealed the final soul into a transparent container. 5 men. 2 had the aptitude to become Shinigami, a probability that shouldn't exist in a place like District 62. As expected, the harsher the environment, the easier it was to find talent. After all, in a place like this, those without talent didn't survive long. It was like raising parasites, only the strong made it to the end. Aizen might not need these souls anymore, but Masatsuki still did. The ones he had stashed away weren't nearly enough to create the Hueco. Without a shred of sympathy or remorse, Masatsuki sealed the container. Not a single one of them had clean hands. If he had time to pity them, he might as well start thinking about what to eat for tomorrow's meals. Besides, as a member of the 13th Division of Imperial Guards, keeping order was part of the job. Killing these criminals, who disrupted the already fragile peace, was practically an act of justice. If old man Yamamoto found out, he'd probably even commend him. Maybe he'd award him a banner or something. Masatsuki waited a moment until the corpses fully dissolved into Rishi before searching the house. Retrieving Mayuri Kurotsuchi's note from his pocket, he followed its instructions out of the living room and into the bedroom. Outside, the moonlight was swallowed by thick clouds. In the dim light, Masatsuki spotted a hidden mechanism in the wall. He pressed it, and a low rumble echoed from beneath the bed. Unfazed, he pushed the wooden bed aside, revealing a hidden passage below. Raising Bansho Senran, he gathered Rishi into the blade. A soft blue glow radiated from the Zanpakutō, illuminating the darkness below. Peering into the depths of the passage, Masatsuki let out a small chuckle. Let's see what you've been up to, Mayuri Kurotsuchi. Don't disappoint me. Chapter 70, Mayuri Kurotsuchi's Technology. Mayuri Kurotsuchi, that madman. He was already thinking about creating artificial Shinigami 100 years ago. Masatsuki Ozaki flipped through Mayuri Kurotsuchi's research notes, clicking his tongue in admiration. Too bad G-Con technology didn't exist back then, and neither did Mod Soul technology. He had to figure it all out from scratch. That must have been a nightmare. The foundation of G-Con technology was based on Garyo Hikaifune's temporary soul techniques, while Mod Soul technology had yet to be developed even now. For Mayuri to tackle such a difficult project alone, it was no surprise how challenging it had been. But his efforts weren't entirely fruitless. Masatsuki flipped open another notebook. Inside, it documented a technique, one that could completely isolate Rishi. As he read through it carefully, a realization struck him. No wonder this guy wanted to research the Quincy. This technique had been developed by studying how Quincy manipulate Rishi. It involved constructing a stable Rishi membrane to cut off the interaction between external and internal Rishi. Mayuri had stumbled upon this method during his research into artificial Shinigami bodies. His theory was that this technique could prevent artificial Shinigami souls from being too fragile, stopping spiritual pressure loss and preventing soul disintegration. Wait. Suppressing spiritual pressure? Masatsuki's eyes widened, and he let out a startled gasp. Something clicked in his mind. Ordinary mod souls were high-density Rishi bodies designed to help Shinigami recover their lost powers. But the version Kusagakure developed later was different, a Rishi body devoid of spiritual pressure, functioning in the exact opposite way. Then he recalled something Aizen had once mentioned: external spiritual pressure could react with the soul's internal spiritual pressure inside the Hueco, affecting its formation. A terrifying possibility formed in Masatsuki's mind. Could it really be just a coincidence? Was this Rishi isolation technique actually the key to creating the Hueco? Masatsuki closed his eyes, forcing himself to recall what he knew about Bleach. In his hazy memories, Aizen had once said he hadn't expected Kusagakure Hogyoku to be so small. From that, it could be inferred that Aizen's failed Hogyoku must have been massive. And before Aizen fused with it, the Hogyoku had always been sealed inside a thin membrane. Could it be that Kusagakure had used a Rishi isolation technique when developing the Hogyoku? Of course, this was all just speculation on Masatsuki's part. The only way to confirm it would be through actual experimentation. But right now, he didn't even have the basic materials needed to create a Hogyoku. He hadn't even made anything resembling Aizen's prototype. Thinking about it was pointless without the foundation to test it. Masatsuki gently brushed the dust off the notebook, tucking it into his robe for safekeeping. Looking around the underground lab, his eyes suddenly gleamed with excitement. What once seemed like an abandoned, century-old laboratory now looked like a treasure trove overflowing with gold. No way. If Mayuri Kurotsuchi left all this for me, I can't let it go to waste. With that, Masatsuki wasted no time. Using both hands, he grabbed 2 pieces of equipment and dashed toward the Kagurashi district. Back when he first attempted to create the Hogyoku in Rukongai, he had secretly built a hidden chamber beneath the outskirts of the Kagurashi district to avoid drawing attention. After his initial experiments failed, that chamber had since become his storage for collected souls. Masatsuki Ozaki wasn't comfortable leaving all these valuable things in someone else's hands. So he decided to move everything to his own secret base. Whatever couldn't be transported, he'd destroy. The whole operation took a full 30 minutes. If he hadn't remembered midway that he could use Bakudo number 37, 6 hanging ropes, to create a small hammock for transport, it would have taken even longer. This was the deal he had made with Mayuri Kurotsuchi. Masatsuki had given Mayuri a reason to enjoy life again in the nest of maggots and promised him freedom in return. And Mayuri had handed over everything he once possessed. For Masatsuki, this was an absolute win, not to mention that some of the technology he obtained could very well be related to the creation of the Hogyoku. The makeshift equipment he had set up for Mayuri in the nest of maggots was practically junk compared to what was in this lab. These machines might look old and bulky, but they were far more advanced, capable of conducting a much wider range of experiments. For a moment, he was tempted to restart his own Hogyoku experiments. Masatsuki stepped out of the secret chamber. The sun had already risen, casting a golden glow in the east. Despite having spent the entire night awake underground, he felt no exhaustion. If anything, he was more energized than ever. Mayuri's findings had been beyond his expectations. He still hadn't fully processed everything. After a while, he returned to Siriite AI. Kusagakure stretched and let out a yawn. So, what brings you here so early in the morning? You look exhausted. Stayed up all night working on the protective gear. I was just catching up on sleep in my office when you dragged me out. Sleeping during the day, staying up all night. Not bad. Just like my external brain, our lifestyles are practically the same. Don't assign me some weird title, Kusagakure retorted. I just think more clearly at night. It's easier to find inspiration. So, did you come to take advantage of my half-asleep state and trick me into becoming your external brain? Of course not. Masatsuki waved a hand dismissively. Actually, I need a favor. Kusagakure sighed, rubbing his temples. Was this all he was to them? Whenever they needed something, they'd come find him. And when they didn't, they'd team up with Yoruichi to mess with him. What kind of friendship was this? Was he just their personal handyman? Or some unwilling participant in their bizarre games? His eye twitched as he gritted his teeth. What do you want? Masatsuki clapped a hand on his shoulder, offering a reassuring pat. It's about Yoruichi. She came to see me last night. And mentioned Kukaku. The moment Kusagakure heard Yoruichi and Kukaku's names in the same sentence, a knowing smirk spread across his face. After all, he was the one who had started this whole situation. Everything was unfolding just as he had planned. A good friend always returns a prank with another prank. Let me guess, Kusagakure mused smugly. Yoruichi found out you were giving Kukaku a protective suit and got jealous? He leaned forward, clearly enjoying himself. She's been running all over looking for you, so now you've come to hide out with me? No. Masatsuki shook his head. Kusagakure blinked. Huh? She was a little upset at first, but after I promised to get her a gift, she ran off excitedly. Masatsuki frowned slightly. I have no idea what's going on with her, but I made a promise, and I intend to keep it. That's why I came to ask you to make a gift for me. Kusagakure pondered for a moment, unable to figure out what Yoruichi was thinking either. After a brief pause, he asked, what kind of gift? A necklace, something like the one she usually wears. Masatsuki's expression brightened. If it could change size at will, that'd be ideal. And if it could transform into a weapon? Even better. Chapter 71, Baldy Kusagakure was about to respond when a figure with an imposing presence approached from the distance. Both men instinctively turned their attention toward the newcomer. Narrowing his eyes, Kusuk observed for a moment before speaking casually. The captain went to the 1st Division yesterday to meet with the captain commander, and you haven't returned to your squad since you left. Seeing you in such high spirits today, I take it you've brought good news? Masatsuki Ozaki raised 2 fingers. Kusuk, I'm leaving those 2 things in your hands. Otherwise, I won't be able to sleep peacefully. Have some shame, will you? Kusuk shot him a sideways glance. Is that how you ask someone for a favor? Kurahara-san, I'm counting on you. Masatsuki bowed slightly. That's more like it. Kusuk nodded. Fine, I'll reluctantly agree. Garyo-Hikaifun walked up to them, chuckling. Masatsuki, did you get yourself into trouble again? Something like that. Masatsuki remained unfazed. But with Kusuk's help, I'll have everything under control. Kusuk ignored him and instead turned his attention to Garyo-Hikaifun, smiling. Captain, how did it go? Did the captain commander approve? With me personally handling it, how could there be any surprises? Garyo placed her hands on her hips and declared proudly, the captain commander has officially approved the establishment of the Shinigami Research and Development Institute. He appointed me as the director, and Masatsuki Ozaki as the institute's special advisor. His position will be equivalent to that of the deputy director. She turned to Kusuk with a grin. Kusagakure, starting today, as the director of the Shinigami Research and Development Institute, I officially appoint you as the deputy director. Your job is to assist me in setting up the institute. Kusuk blinked. But by rank, shouldn't Lieutenant Sarugaki be the deputy director? He asked hesitantly. Why me? Garyo waved a hand, laughing. Because I know exactly what you're capable of, Kusuk. Don't worry, I already appointed Hori Sarugaki as the head of the research lab. Masatsuki raised a hand. What about Mayuri Kurotsuchi? Are we giving him an advisory position too? For now, we'll let him hold a consultant position. I can provide him with some experimental equipment, but he needs to stay in the nest of maggots for the time being. Garyo shook her head. Once I'm promoted to the 0 Division, the 2 of you can decide whether or not to release him, depending on the situation. Masatsuki tilted his head. Any particular reason? That man is difficult to control, and I don't have time to train him, Garyo said with a slight smile. If you 2 are capable enough in the future, figure out a way to reform him yourselves. Masatsuki and Kusuk exchanged glances before nodding in agreement. A group of figures appeared ahead, led by a small girl who sprinted forward, pointing at Kusagakure and shouting, Baldy. Slacking off again? I've been looking for you forever. Kusuk scratched his cheek awkwardly, glancing away. Masatsuki Ozaki couldn't help but snicker. What are you laughing at, Baldy? What Baldy? I have hair, you little brat. With that, Masatsuki rolled up his sleeves, ready to teach the kid a lesson, but Kusuk quickly grabbed him to hold him back. Huh? Brat? The girl was instantly enraged. How dare you call me a brat? I'm a woman. Who do you think you are, looking down on me? You're just some freak who charms people with his looks. Garyo-Hikaifun placed a gentle hand on the girl's head. Hori, calm down. Surprisingly, Hori Sarugaki actually listened, settling down with a reluctant, yes. Masatsuki was stunned. What's up with this kid? Well then, Masatsuki-kun, we'll be going now. Drop by when you can. Garyo waved as she pulled Hori along toward the barracks. I'll head out too, Kusuk said, exchanging a glance with Masatsuki before following after them. After leaving the 12th Division, Masatsuki returned to the 6th District, where both the 2nd and 6th Division barracks were located. Passing by the 2nd Division, he went straight to his personal training ground, well, technically, the nest of maggots, where he oversaw the prisoners. Before entering, he signaled to the detention unit guards to disable the surveillance from the monitoring bugs in the regular prison. After all, beating up prisoners wasn't exactly something to publicize. No one would understand he was training. The wise men and judges of the Central 46 were always looking for excuses to make trouble, and if they decided to brand him as violent, they might just downgrade his status from prison administrator to inmate. Activating Kyoka Suigetsu in advance, Masatsuki nodded in satisfaction. The strongest illusion type Zanpakutō, though it couldn't boost his combat power beyond his spiritual pressure level like Rijinjaka, it had a different kind of advantage. The ability to deceive the Darisha Kairo alone was more than enough. A must-have for any schemer in Soul Society. Pushing open the heavy doors, Masatsuki stepped into the underground prison and loaded a few red pills into a pouch. These were high-density Rishi pills developed by Kusagakure. For a lieutenant-class Shinigami, just one could quickly restore their depleted spiritual pressure. The downside. If the body wasn't strong enough, The sudden influx of spiritual pressure could cause severe damage. Masatsuki stood in the middle of the prison, bare-chested, his expression relaxed. These guys had clearly forgotten the fear they felt the last time he beat them into submission. One after another, they charged at him like rabid beasts. From here on out, he would only use spiritual pressure and hand-to-hand combats, no Zanpakutō. His goal was simple: knock every single one of them to the ground. None of them held back when attacking. The stronger the prisoners, the better the training. Masatsuki thrived in this kind of combat. Dancing on the edge of life and death, pushing his spiritual pressure to its limits, depleting and replenishing it over and over again, this was why his spiritual pressure grew so quickly. Whether he could break through to a higher level depended on just how durable these prisoners were. And this wasn't going to be a short process. Fortunately, Central 46 always had more criminals to toss in. Even if he accidentally killed a sparring partner, there'd be a fresh batch before long. Taking a deep breath, Masatsuki let out a wild laugh and rushed toward the strongest prisoners, those with lieutenant-level strength. They were the top dogs in this prison. Captain-level criminals. They never ended up here. They were thrown straight into the central great underground prison. A towering, bald prisoner grinned as Masatsuki approached. "You've got some guts, kid, coming back here." With a smirk, the prisoner swung his massive hand, a gust of wind kicking up as his palm's shadow engulfed Masatsuki's upper body. But in the blink of an eye, he lost sight of Masatsuki entirely. Before he could react, an invisible force slammed into him like a tidal wave, sending his massive frame hurtling through the air like a cannonball. Masatsuki dusted off his hand, flashing a confident grin. "What are you talking about? I wasn't the one who lost last time." For more chapters, feel free to follow me on Patreon using the button below or via the link. Chapter 72, Assault. You're asking for death. Die. Several furious roars rang out at once as the prisoners lunged at Masatsuki Ozaki, attacking with fists and kicks. "Ikatsu." He grinned, the surge of dopamine electrifying his brain. His face twisted with excitement and madness, appearing no different from a demon in the eyes of the crazed prisoners. Cold sweat broke out on their foreheads. At this moment, Masatsuki had the urge to shout, "Yachiru! Anohana, you were right. I do love to fight." Boom. Thick, solid walls shattered as two prisoners crashed through them, leaving massive craters in their wake and sending dust billowing into the air. Whoosh! A sharp explosion tore through the atmosphere, the deafening sound ringing in their ears. Shing! Two prisoners appeared at Masatsuki's flank, their sudden movement knocking aside weaker inmates. Their fists and knife-hand strikes came crashing down on him with ruthless force. Their attacks landed. But what happened next defied all reason. With two resounding booms, Rishi rippled outward like a shockwave. The powerful punch and knife-hand strike slammed into Masatsuki's chest and neck, yet instead of wounding him, they merely forced him back a few steps. The prisoner's pupil shrank in disbelief. Masatsuki Ozaki stood there, completely unscathed, not a single mark on him. "You monster!" A shocked voice rang out, but Masatsuki had already disappeared from their sight. Bang! A dull impact echoed as a heavy fist crashed into the abdomen of the prisoner who had swung his knife-hand strike. His body instinctively curled forward, his eyes nearly bulging out of their sockets, his mouth gaping wide. A strong hand seized his black hair and smashed his head into the ground. A cold, bloodthirsty face filled another prisoner's vision. "You two are too weak. Why aren't the others joining in?" Masatsuki swiftly reached out, gripping the prisoner's throat and lifting him off the ground. He sneered. "Are you so-called dangerous criminals actually afraid of me? You'll die here." A surge of pain shot through the prisoner's neck, but the choking sensation only fueled his viciousness. His bloodshot eyes burned with pure malice. The surrounding prisoners, feeling humiliated, bared their teeth and charged at Masatsuki with savage roars. But Masatsuki only smirked mockingly. With a flick of his wrist, he hurled the prisoner forward. The airborne body smashed directly into the incoming attackers. Boom! A powerful shockwave sent dust swirling, and a cluster of prisoners was knocked away like bowling pins. Without missing a beat, Masatsuki twisted his body and shot backward like an arrow loosed from a bow. His small fists, carrying an overwhelming force, slammed into the prisoners with relentless power. Arg! Ugh! Agonized screams filled the air. Prisoners coughed up mouthfuls of blood, their eyes losing focus as they were sent flying. "Damn it! We're the ones the Central 46 fears." Their crazed roars echoed through the dungeon, as if trying to muster the courage to face a true monster. But Masatsuki's wild, predatory gaze only grew more menacing. He shook off the blood staining his hands, his eyes flashing with savage intensity. The crimson streaks on his skin only made him look more terrifying. "Sokatsu!" With a furious roar, Masatsuki Ozaki unleashed an overwhelming force upon the prisoners. Boom! The devastating impact sent one prisoner flying, crashing into several others behind him. Blood sprayed through the air, a crimson mist spreading throughout the dungeon as the ground and walls cracked under the sheer force, leaving deep fissures. The difference in power was crushing. Masatsuki's close combat prowess was so overwhelming that anyone below the level of a captain could only despair. But the prisoners didn't care. They had long abandoned reason, lost in madness. Even as they witnessed the carnage, they laughed and continued their reckless charge toward Masatsuki. Ozaki-sama is as formidable as ever. He's been in there for so long. Of course. The first time Ozaki-sama went in, the prisoners were all lying on the ground when he came out. This time will be no different. The squad members stationed outside the dungeon spoke among themselves. Jin Ikamaru approached the entrance, his suspicions already forming, but he still asked, "Where is Masatsuki-sama?" The squad members bowed before one of the gatekeepers responded, "Masatsuki-sama is inside, patrolling the dungeon." Jin's gaze lingered on the door as he sighed inwardly, though he showed no outward reaction. He knew Masatsuki Ozaki had once again buried himself in his training. Yoruichi Shioin appeared behind him, watching quietly for a moment before speaking with a rare seriousness in her tone. "He went in alone? No other squad members accompanied him?" "Yes. Ozaki-sama turned off the surveillance bugs and strictly ordered us not to enter without permission." The squad member stood at attention and answered respectfully, "Whenever Ozaki-sama patrols the dungeon, he prefers not to be disturbed." Jin's ever-present smile remained, though it teetered on the edge of amusement. "Captain, no need to worry. Masatsuki will be fine. This is just routine training." Yoruichi spoke calmly, "Aside from the captain commander, no one understands his strength better than I do. Of course, I trust him. No one in this prison can threaten his life. But now is not the time for training." Jin was momentarily taken aback. What could be urgent enough to make the usually carefree Yoruichi sound so serious? Had the 2nd Division been attacked? Or had Sirieide AI been infiltrated? Still, as the 9th seat, he wasn't in a position to question Yoruichi, so he remained silent. Yoruichi, sensing his thoughts, spoke lazily, "It's nothing classified." Jin tilted his head slightly. "Then what happened?" Yoruichi leaned against the wall, her tone casual but her words carrying weight. "Shino Academy was attacked by rebels. Maranoshin has already led the patrol corps and the executive militia there. TCH. The Central 46 really loves making a fuss. It's just some rebels, and yet they issued an order for us to deploy immediately." The surrounding squad members instinctively turned their heads, pretending they hadn't heard anything. Mocking the Central 46 was something Yoruichi could do freely, but they wouldn't dare acknowledge it. Jin furrowed his brows. Now it all made sense. The attack on Shino Academy had prompted the 2nd Division's deployment. Since this was an official order from the Central 46, Masatsuki, as a high-ranking seated officer, was expected to be there. And judging by Yoruichi's tone, she likely intended for him to gain some merit from the situation as well. Straightening up, Yoruichi issued her command. "Jin, you'll oversee the detention unit in my absence. Leave enough men to guard the nest of maggots and the barracks. Take the rest and head to Shino Academy. Hold the position until Masatsuki arrives to relieve you." "I'll go ahead." "Yes." Jin's tone was uncharacteristically serious. Turning to the guards, he instructed, "When Masatsuki-sama comes out, inform him that Shino Academy has been attacked by rebels. The 2nd Division has sent reinforcements. I'll take the squad ahead and wait for him there." Chapter 73, Become Stronger. Alright, that's enough fun. Masatsuki Ozaki casually scanned the dungeon hall, now reduced to rubble, before pulling out a well-preserved pill from inside his clothing. He ran his tongue over his lips, tilted his head back, and popped the pill into his mouth. Grinning, he revealed his pristine white teeth as he bit down with a satisfying crunch. "Everyone. Thank you for risking your lives to fight me. This battle was truly enjoyable. I look forward to our next encounter. Hopefully, you'll be stronger next time." Masatsuki propped one foot on a boulder, taking a moment to catch his breath. In just a few seconds, his spiritual power had fully replenished. Wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth, he glanced at the prisoners sprawled across the ground, then turned toward the dungeon's exit. Upon stepping outside, he turned to one of the Shinigami stationed at the entrance. "Turn the surveillance bugs back on." "Yes, sir." One of the Shinigami, eyes filled with admiration, gave a nod before running off toward the monitoring room. "Ozaki-sama." Another Shinigami suddenly stepped forward and spoke respectfully. "What is it?" Masatsuki frowned slightly. "Just now, the captain and 9th seat Ikamaru came by. They said Shino Academy was under attack, and the Central 46 compound has ordered reinforcements." "I see." Masatsuki rubbed his chin, nodding as he processed the information. Without hesitation, he left the nest of maggots, taking 2 squad members with him as he headed toward Shino Academy. He stepped through the door with a carefree ease, as if he were heading out on a casual outing with classmates. The moment the door closed behind him, Sairi AI fell into a deathly silence. Masatsuki walked for some time, but his pace gradually slowed. Not far ahead, he noticed 2 patrolling Shinigami holding lanterns. He frowned. Sairi AI at night was nothing new to him. Many of his activities required the cover of darkness, where sense could be concealed in the shadows. Maybe it was a remnant of logic from his past life, but he had always felt that nighttime was the safest time to do bad things. It was self-deception, perhaps, but that irrational belief had always brought him a strange sense of security. Yet, tonight felt different. What are they standing there for? Slacking off? Masatsuki muttered casually, though his muscles had already tensed, ready for combat at a moment's notice. He could tell the difference between a patrolling Shinigami and a stationed guard. And he knew the difference between the living and the dead. The air was unnervingly still. The 2 figures in the distance remained motionless, yet there was no sense of life coming from them. His seemingly offhand remark had also caught the attention of 2 Onmitsukido members lurking in the shadows. They froze, holding their breath as they carefully observed their surroundings from the rooftops. A long moment passed before Masatsuki felt the familiar sensation of a gentle breeze against his skin. Yes. Night really was the best time to do bad things. Glancing up at the sky, now obscured by thick clouds, his hand slowly moved to the hilt of his blade. Is that a patrol Shinigami? Damn it. Who would dare commit murder within Sairi AI? Their bodies haven't dissolved into Rishi yet, the attacker must still be nearby. Shouting, several night patrol Shinigami gripped their lanterns tightly and ran in the direction of the bloodstains. But just as they rounded a street corner, several dark figures suddenly dropped from above. They wore black masks and night-ops attire that blended seamlessly into the darkness, exuding an air of mystery. A flash of cold steel. Squelch. Squelch. The sickening sound of blood spraying filled the air as the patrol Shinigami let out pained cries, collapsing to the ground one by one. Similar scenes played out all across the 6th District, where the line between life and death blurred in the night. In front of the 6th Division barracks, a patrolling Shinigami stood frozen in terror, eyes wide as he watched a gleaming blade arc through the air. In an instant, a figure appeared before him. The newcomer was wrapped in bandages, his Zanpakutō raised high, its edge flashing with deadly precision. Slash. With a single motion, the assassin in midair faltered, their body going limp as blood sprayed outward. The attacker, still gasping for breath on the ground, was immediately restrained by the Shinigami behind him. Turning his head, the bandaged figure spoke gently. Are you hurt? You're Lieutenant Kuichiki? The stunned Shinigami snapped back to reality, his fear replaced with relief. He nodded quickly. Why yes. I'm fine. Thank you so much, Lieutenant Kuichiki. Sajun Kuichiki gave a small nod. Just then, another Shinigami approached him and whispered. Lieutenant, you should come take a look. Sajun frowned. What is it, 3rd Seat Jinjiro? The attacker killed himself, Jinjiro replied. He had poison hidden in his mouth. By the time we noticed, the toxin had already taken effect. He struggled for a moment before dying completely. Sajun listened, momentarily caught off guard. His gaze flickered slightly, and his expression turned increasingly grim. Something felt off. After years of battling rebels, he knew one thing for certain, the rebels didn't have assassination squads. They, like the Shinigami of the 13th Division of Imperial Guards, preferred direct combat with swords. But these assassinations. This method of killing. It reminded him of only 2 groups. One was the Onmitsukido, the stealth force known for assassination. The other, were the retainers trained in secrecy by noble families. The Kuichiki clan, being the model of nobility, naturally did not keep such retainers. Their strict code of honor upheld direct combat. Assassination and underhanded tactics were beneath them. They did not rely on external forces, only their own strength. However, Sajun was well aware that many noble families did not share the same ideals. To some nobles, these clandestine retainers were essential, serving as both hidden enforcers and tools for carrying out unspeakable tasks. The way these intruders fought raised a troubling question: was there a noble family involved in this so-called rebel attack? Sajun and Jinjiro exchanged a glance, an uneasy feeling settling over them. The last time they had been attacked, they had nearly been wiped out. Their wounds had yet to fully heal. Had it not been for Masatsuki Ozaki and Yoruichi Shioin, Sajun would have died in that rebellion suppression mission. He wouldn't have made it this far. Have there been similar attacks in other districts? Sajun asked, frowning. Jinjiro shook his head. Not sure. We haven't received any reports from other districts. Sajun exhaled slowly, his mind racing. If the other districts haven't been targeted, then the rebels' true objective may not be Shino Academy. They went through all this trouble to divert the 13th Division of Imperial Guards' attention toward the academy. But their real target could be right here in the 6th district. Jinjiro hesitated. But the 6th district is where both the 2nd and 6th divisions are stationed. The 2nd division has already been deployed to Shino Academy. Could it be that their target is you again? If they send another captain-level Shinigami, we'll be in serious trouble. We should hurry and find the captain. Chapter 74, Encounter with a captain-level Shinigami. Masatsuki Ozaki eyed the two-night patrol Shinigami in the distance and slowly drew Bansho Senran from his waist. He had just taken a step forward when the two Shinigami suddenly stirred. A chilling rip echoed from their bodies. Like something straight out of a horror film, their joints twisted unnaturally, their limbs jerking as they raised their asakis. The corpses slowly lifted their heads, pausing for a brief moment before suddenly breaking into a sprint toward Masatsuki. Blood streamed from their 7 orifices, their grotesque expressions making it clear they were already dead. What the hell is this? The two Onmitsukito members hiding in the shadows froze, an icy shiver running down their spines. A wave of cold sweat drenched their uniforms as they stared, horrified. They had never seen anything like this before. From all observations, these Shinigami were supposed to be dead. And yet, they were still moving. Still running. Still swinging their blades. Masatsuki stood in the middle of the passage. Above him, the stars shimmered in the night sky. Around him, footsteps echoed from the lifeless figures concealed in the shadows. The Onmitsukito agents swallowed hard, their hands instinctively gripping the short swords at their waists. Years of rigorous training allowed them to quickly suppress their fear and steel their minds. They held their breath, readying themselves. All they had to do was wait for the undead to get close enough, then strike first and behead them. Masatsuki's lips curled into a taunting smirk, as if he'd already seen through the illusion. In a blur of movement, he vanished, reappearing behind the two charging Shinigami. A flick of his blade. Blood droplets traced a delicate arc in the air before splattering onto the ground. The Shinigami's movements came to an abrupt halt. A second later. Under the stunned gazes of the two Onmitsukito agents, the undead were cleaved cleanly in half. So this is Ozaki-sama's strength? That's terrifying. I couldn't even see his movements. He's no weaker than a lieutenant-level Shinigami. Both men instinctively swallowed hard, the same realization dawning on them. Now they understood why this man had become a 3rd seat immediately after graduating from Shino Academy. Ryuzuki, 6th seat. Izumo, 8th seat. I tried using Tentakura, but it seems these guys were well prepared. Tentakura has been neutralized. Masatsuki lifted his gaze to the night sky. Even to the naked eye, the air appeared slightly distorted, as if an invisible membrane was interfering with the natural flow of Rishi. He swung Bansho Senran, focusing his spiritual pressure along the blade. A brilliant azure wave of energy slashed forward, tearing a gaping hole in the barrier. The surrounding Rishi reacted instantly, clinging to the breach in an attempt to mend it. But before it could fully repair itself, a massive surge of spiritual pressure had already been unleashed, without restraint. Go get backup, preferably a captain. This opponent is a bit troublesome. Ryuzuki and Izumo hesitated briefly, but Masatsuki Ozaki continued, his tone calm. The next battle will be dangerous. I won't be able to protect you. Exchanging a glance, the two vanished into the darkness. Masatsuki turned his gaze forward, his voice unhurried. If you don't come out soon, I'm leaving. As expected of the Captain Commander's disciple. You actually noticed me, I thought I was hidden well enough. A voice rang out. Masatsuki's lips curled into a cold smile as he got a clear look at the person standing before him. A tall, lean man with white hair approached from the far end of the street. His right arm was encased in a metallic gauntlet, with thin, gleaming threads extending from the joints. They actually sent a captain level to kill me? What an honor, Masatsuki thought. He narrowed his eyes playfully. They're running off to warn the others. Aren't you going after them? When the 13th Division of Imperial Guards captains arrive, you won't be able to escape. Don't worry about that. Someone else will take care of those two brats. The white-haired man smirked mockingly. You're smart. You didn't charge at me recklessly, nor did you run. Instead, you let them escape while keeping my attention on you. But unfortunately, my target is only you. Don't make it sound like I'm using them, Masatsuki shrugged. I sincerely hope they make it out. Is that so? Let's go with that, then. The man chuckled, engaging in casual conversation as if he weren't in a hurry to fight. Are these guys drunk? Or just too obsessed with women? Masatsuki mused. He had already released his spiritual pressure through the sword pressure that had just split the night sky. The longer this dragged on, the more advantageous it was for him. The white-haired man laughed derisively. But your so-called self-sacrifice is meaningless. The weak deserve to die by the sword. Acting relaxed only makes you look ridiculous." Suddenly, a deep crack echoed beneath them. Masatsuki instinctively sidestepped as razor-thin metal threads shot up from the ground. He smirked. "Self-sacrifice? I don't have that kind of mindset. I just don't think you're strong enough to kill me." As he spoke, Bansho Senran completed its shike, its form shifting as it mimicked the abilities of the Bakunsho. With a casual flick of his wrist, the metal wires emerging from the ground were severed effortlessly. Then, he shot the white-haired man a deliberately condescending glance. "Trying to piss me off? Congratulations, you succeeded." The man's expression twisted with rage. "You looking to die? I'll grant your wish." To this man, who appeared to live a privileged life but was, in reality, treated like a noble's pet, constantly seeking validation, Masatsuki's words were nothing short of an insult to his very existence. As expected, his pride was wounded. With a snarl, he clenched his right fist, and the metallic thread sprang to life, coiling around his body to form a full suit of armor. A massive, 2-meter-long spear materialized in his grip. Then, like a steel-clad behemoth, he charged at Masatsuki. The sheer force of his steps shattered the ground beneath him, leaving deep craters in his wake. His speed surged to its peak, like a cannonball with devastating power. Paired with the metal spear, he resembled a rampaging steel rhino. Boom! A heavy impact. The white-haired man stared in disbelief as Masatsuki, having blocked the attack with his Zanpakutō, was forced back several meters. Then he saw it, the twisted, exhilarated grin on Masatsuki's face. For a moment, his mind went blank. He actually blocked it? But the next second, his pupils shrank. Fine cracks had formed along the surface of his supposedly indestructible metal spear. This was a weapon condensed from his full-powered spiritual pressure burst, far tougher than the wires he had used in his earlier sneak attack. "Masatsuki Ozaki. I've heard of your feats before, but fighting you firsthand. I have to admit, I'm impressed. The Captain Commander didn't choose you as his disciple for nothing. If I had met you first, I wouldn't have wanted to let go of such a promising talent either." As he spoke, the bulky metal armor on his body began to contract, molding more tightly to his frame. With a swift motion, he spun his spear, and in an instant, the cracks disappeared. Chapter 75, Battle Against a Captain-Level Shinigami. Your talent. I fear that even in the millions of years of Soul Society's history, few could compare to you. I believe that if given the chance to grow, you would undoubtedly surpass me and perhaps even stand on equal footing with His Excellency, the Captain Commander. But unfortunately, you revealed your strength too soon. Today, you are destined to die here. The moment those words fell, silvery white threads wrapped around the white-haired man's body, glinting faintly with a metallic sheen. His entire body was encased in metal threads, leaving only his eyes visible. 6 additional arms sprouted from his back, and with a 2 gripping a long spear, he now resembled an 8-armed Ashura. Masatsuki Ozaki had to admit, the transformation looked impressive, but he couldn't help but scoff. "You seriously think you can compare yourself to old man Yamamoto?" Sure, he often mocked the old man for being overly dramatic, but the fact remained, Yamamoto had the strength to back it up. And if this white-haired man thought he could measure up, as Yamamoto's disciple, Masatsuki was the first to object. The white-haired man stomped forward, charging at Masatsuki with ferocious speed. Masatsuki swung his blade in a downward diagonal slash. A brilliant blue wave of sword pressure erupted from the edge, shooting toward his opponent. Hiss! Metal threads burst from the white-haired man's left side, forming what looked like a massive hand pressing against the ground. With a swift spin, he evaded the incoming strike. Boom! A massive fissure, over 10 meters long, split the ground ahead. The earth groaned in agony, torn apart by the impact. Dust and debris swirled in the air as the white-haired man crouched low, his movements swift and predatory as he darted through the thick smoke. Clang! Suddenly, the sharp whistle of a spear cutting through the air rang out. The long spear pierced through the billowing smoke, and as it swept across, the dust scattered like retreating tides. The gleaming silver battle armor radiated a cold, menacing light. The white-haired man's gaze was piercing, his grip firm on the spear as he lunged forward, thrusting straight at Masatsuki. Splurt! The spear's deadly tip slashed across Masatsuki's chest, carving a deep wound as blood sprayed into the air. Good thing I dodged in time. This is my chance. Blood seeped into his Shyakusho, dyeing it red, but Masatsuki merely gritted his teeth and seized the opening, swinging his blade. The positioning of the two was strange, the spear had cut through Masatsuki, yet he remained standing. The white-haired man lunged past him, his 6 additional arms outstretched in a grasping motion, as if trying to pull Masatsuki into an embrace. The radiant glow of sword pressure dispelled the surrounding darkness. For a brief moment, night turned to day. Bansho Senran descended in a slanted arc, its immense sword pressure condensed within the blade, yet it did not erupt outward. Splurt. Masatsuki's katana sank into the white-haired man's right shoulder, grinding against the silver armor with a shower of sparks. Boom. A massive explosion erupted from the impact, with the white-haired man at its center. Die already. Seeing his opponent sent flying, Masatsuki closed in, only to sense a razor-sharp presence surging toward him from within the smoke. From the swirling dust, several needle-like appendages formed from metal threads shot forward with deadly precision. Masatsuki glanced at his pierced shoulder but remained unfazed. Leaping into the air, he swung his blade single-handedly, slicing through the oncoming tendrils. Just then, the white-haired man's figure reappeared. With a single wave of his hand, the surrounding smoke instantly dispersed. He turned his head slightly, glancing at his shoulder, his eyes darkened with fury. There, a faint but unmistakable wound marred his skin, staining his silver armor with a streak of crimson. His swordplay is sharp, and his combat ability is formidable. It's as if I'm facing a second Yamamoto. And that strange Zanpakutō that managed to break through my defenses. I suppose it's only fitting for a future disciple of the Captain Commander. The white-haired man muttered to himself, relieved that he had come for this assassination instead of a lieutenant-level Shinigami. With a flick of his fingers, silver threads coiled through the air, weaving an intricate barrier to prevent Masatsuki Ozaki from getting any closer. At the same time, he drove his spear into the ground and pressed a hand against his wounded shoulder. Within moments, the gash was stitched shut. Still, the gap in our spiritual pressure isn't something that can be closed with mere swordsmanship or a strong spiritual body. Don't underestimate a captain class, brat. He let out a furious roar, tinged with humiliation. A captain-level fighter, being pushed to such a disgraceful state by a lieutenant. No one would believe it. Clang. Masatsuki Ozaki had already closed the distance, his glowing blue blade striking down at the white-haired man's outstretched palm. The katana cut through his silver gauntlet, but then stopped, caught in place. Countless silver threads erupted from the gauntlet, twisting and coiling around the blade, locking it in place. The silver armor on the white-haired man's body pulsed as if alive, its threads surging wildly to ensnare Bansho Senran. A fierce wind scattered the dust and debris in all directions. A grin spread beneath the white-haired man's mask. For most Shinigami, losing control of their Zanpakutō was the worst possible scenario. Their combat relied on harmonizing their swordplay with their spiritual pressure, balancing attack and defense. Once their Zanpakutō was taken from them, their battle strength would plummet. And without that troublesome blade capable of piercing his defenses, this brat was no longer a threat. The white-haired man bared his teeth in triumph, raising his right hand as he shifted into a stance. Silver threads twisted chaotically, coating his arm completely. The 6 metal limbs on his back grew even thicker, their steel sheen reflecting the chaos of battle. His iron fist was ready to strike. Yet, as he gathered power in his arm, exposing gaps in his chest armor, Masatsuki Ozaki stepped forward without hesitation. It was as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. His left hand clenched into a tight fist, gathering spiritual pressure. Then, with explosive force, he threw a punch. Ikatsu. A single devastating strike slammed into the white-haired man's chest. Boom. A shockwave of white energy blasted out from his back. His face turned deathly pale as the silver armor across his torso shattered, revealing a deep concave dent in his chest. His grip on Bansho Senran loosened, but because he had been restraining the katana just moments ago, he didn't immediately get blown away. His eyes widened in disbelief. His body was failing him, but his Zanpakutō had yet to release its shikai. The 6 mechanical arms surged forward, slicing through the air with ruthless precision. Masatsuki Ozaki's lips curled into a bloodthirsty grin. He let go of Bansho Senran, then lunged forward, fists flying. Flesh clashed against steel in a relentless flurry of blows. Even as his hands grew bloodied and torn, he didn't stop. He struck again and again, until, crack. One by one, the metal arms shattered. The white-haired man staggered back half a step. Masatsuki Ozaki stepped forward. With his opponent's defenses in ruins, he raised his fists again, unwilling to give him even a second to recover. Spiritual pressure surged through his hands as he threw his final strike. Sokatsu. What is this? The white-haired man barely had time to register his horror before both of Masatsuki's fists crashed into his abdomen. Boom. A thunderous shockwave burst outward, rippling through the battlefield. This time, there was no resistance. The white-haired man's body was sent hurtling back like a severed kite, crashing violently into a wall. Dust and rubble exploded from the impact. Masatsuki Ozaki caught the falling Bansho Senran, sheathed his blade, and vanished in a flash of flash steps. Drip. Drip. The faint sound of blood dripping onto the ground echoed in the silence. Then, from the rubble, The white-haired man's figure slowly emerged once more. Chapter 76, The Second Attacker. The white-haired man lay in a pile of rubble, struggling to lift his head as blood seeped from his mouth. A sense of disbelief washed over him. His silk-threaded armor, along with the Zanpakutō that covered his right arm like a gauntlet, had been completely shattered and fallen away. His body fared no better. A gaping, bloody hole had torn through his abdomen, his internal organs nowhere to be found. And Masatsuki Ozaki had done it all with his bare hands. The white-haired man's mouth hung open in shock. He panted heavily, his face twisted in panic and fear. Seeing the extent of his injuries, Masatsuki Ozaki relaxed slightly. He rolled his shoulder, wincing at the pain, and let out a sharp hiss before grinning. "Looks like you're in bad shape. I really did go all out, but I still couldn't shatter your body with a single hit. As expected, I'm still nowhere near master's level." The white-haired man let out a muffled groan, coughing up a mouthful of blood. Bracing a hand against the ground, he slowly pushed himself back until he was leaning against a nearby wall, slumping down to sit. The Captain Commander's Sokatsu truly lives up to its name. I never imagined it could be so terrifying. He tried to maintain a steady tone, but the tremor in his voice betrayed the truth: pain. Excruciating pain, teetering on the edge of life and death. With a hole torn through his gut, an ordinary Shinigami would have died instantly. If not for his captain-level physique, which was far more resilient than that of a regular Shinigami, even without rigorous training, he'd have been long gone. "Well, knowing how powerful Master is, you still dared to come and assassinate me?" Masatsuki Ozaki blinked. "Should I be impressed by your courage?" The white-haired man took a deep breath, speaking with difficulty. "There are things in this world that someone has to do." Masatsuki Ozaki scoffed. "That kind of noble talk doesn't suit you." They knew each other too well. Sure, he had done plenty of questionable things. But these guys were no saints either. "No, this isn't some noble sentiment." The white-haired man sneered, shaking his head. "What I mean is, this world is full of ambitious people. Some are cowards, too afraid of the Captain Commander's power to make a move." Masatsuki Ozaki raised an eyebrow. "And you're saying you're not afraid of the old man?" "I am. But my ambition outweighs my fear. I want to rise above everyone else, I want to become a noble." As if the pain no longer mattered, the white-haired man laid his ambitions bare, his final act of defiance. "So I came. My ambition triumphed over my fear. I stood before you, and I have no regrets." He let out a wild laugh before suddenly shifting his tone. "Masatsuki Ozaki, geniuses like you are truly enviable. Even Captain Commander Yamamoto, hailed as the strongest Shinigami in 1,000 years, values you so highly. It's enough to make anyone jealous. But unfortunately for you, luck is on my side. The one who dies here today won't be me." Masatsuki Ozaki shrugged. "Oh? Still hiding a trump card? You're barely holding yourself together. What else could you possibly do? Even if you've mastered Benkei, you're in no condition to use it." At those words, the white-haired man shook his head. "I never intended to use Benkei. But do you remember the two I let go?" Masatsuki Ozaki froze. A chill ran down his spine before he abruptly leaped backward. Looking up, he spotted a trident embedded in the ground. There wasn't just one attacker. And whoever they were, the white-haired man was confident they could take down two mid-to-high-ranking seated officers with ease. The white-haired man clutched at his non-existent stomach, his voice low and strained as he chuckled. "Not bad. You still have some fight left in you. But how much spiritual power do you have left? And how long can you keep running?" A shadowy figure in black flickered into view, appearing beside the white-haired man and yanking the trident from the ground. "Rentaro, why is the target still alive? What's taking you so long?" "I should be asking you that, Takasugi. You sure took your time. Why did it take you so long to deal with those two seated officers?" Seeing a sliver of hope, the white-haired man, Rentaro, gritted his teeth and forced a smile, though resentment still simmered beneath the surface. If Takasugi had arrived sooner, he wouldn't have ended up in this pathetic state. "I ran into a little trouble." Takasugi scanned the area, his expression grave. When his eyes landed on Masatsuki Ozaki, his shock was beyond words. "What the hell happened to you? You're a mess." Though their target was also bloodied, it was obvious that Rentaro had taken the worse beating. Without immediate treatment, he might not survive. Takasugi knew Rentaro's strength. A standard captain-level spiritual pressure. But wasn't Masatsuki Ozaki supposed to have just graduated from the Shino Academy? Wasn't he only in his early 20s? Since when were kids this terrifying? "This brat isn't normal. Every one of these wounds, he gave them to me," Rentaro said grimly. "But after fighting me, he's running on fumes. He barely has any spiritual power left. With your strength, Killing him shouldn't be a problem. Rantaro's voice brimmed with confidence, but Takasugi only gave him a sidelong glance, making no move. He had lived for centuries, and if there was one thing experience had taught him, it was that teammates calling themselves seriously injured were rarely as helpless as they claimed. Hell, he'd seen plenty of fellow soldiers, and rivals, die on the battlefield because they fell for those very words. Now, Rantaro was on the verge of collapse, yet he still had the nerve to say something like that? Takasugi wasn't buying it. And as if to prove him right, Masatsuki Ozaki suddenly flashed a bright, easygoing smile. He slipped his fingers through the blade ring of Bansho Senran, spinning the long sword with a casual flick. His gaze was sharp, like a blade itself, filled with a hunger for battle. It was the look of someone saying, "Come on, let's go for another 300 rounds." TCH. Almost fell for it. Still using Shike, and you call that no spiritual power left? Takasugi cursed inwardly, then muttered without thinking, "You're a damn lunatic." Still, he wasn't the type to back down without testing the waters. With a sudden burst of power, he thrust his trident forward, sending a blue energy wave slashing through the air. Swish. To his shock, Masatsuki Ozaki's figure flickered, and in the blink of an eye, he reappeared a short distance away, completely unscathed. Spinning Bansho Senran, Masatsuki Ozaki compressed his sword pressure into the blade, then charged, slashing at Takasugi with blinding speed. Takasugi's eyes widened as he quickly raised his trident to block. Fast. Not only had Masatsuki Ozaki dodged his attack with flash steps, but he had countered immediately with an attack that was just as fierce. And then, something even more alarming happened. Before his eyes, the shaft of his trident began to bend, straining under the force of the strike. Cracks threatened to spread. Takasugi had no choice. Abandoning his defense, he surged spiritual pressure through his feet and shot backward, retreating at full speed. "We still have a fight to finish." Before Masatsuki Ozaki could finish his sentence, Takasugi suddenly turned on his heel. In one swift motion, he grabbed Rentaro, threw him over his shoulder, and, without so much as a backward glance, took off running into the distance. Chapter 77, Good Child. As Takasugi focused on his escape, Rentaro, slung over his shoulder, fumed with rage. If this guy had arrived sooner, he wouldn't have been beaten so badly. His ambition would have been fulfilled. He would have become a noble, standing above everyone else. And even now, there was still a chance to turn things around. Masatsuki Ozaki's life was within reach. Yet this coward chose to flee? Running away from a heavily wounded, spiritual power-drained lieutenant-class Shinigami? A captain-level warrior, retreating at the slightest sign of trouble. What a disgrace. Jolted by the rough movement, Rentaro coughed up a mouthful of blood. Gritting his teeth, he snapped, "Why are you running?" That guy was bluffing. He's on his last legs. Before Takasugi could answer, a shout rang out from behind. "Are you alright, third seat Ozaki?" Rentaro turned his head. To his shock, the two-seated officers from the 2nd Division, who had previously fled, were now running toward Masatsuki Ozaki. They immediately crowded around him, their faces full of concern. Looking at Masatsuki Ozaki, who was covered in blood, Ryuzuki spoke anxiously. "Ozaki-sama, your injuries are too severe. Please rest, we'll call the 4th Division right away." Masatsuki Ozaki glanced up and noticed that the barrier covering the 6th district had been lifted. His expression turned to surprise. "You two did this?" From the way the attackers spoke, "I thought you were dead. I didn't expect you to not only survive a captain-level traitor but also break the barrier. Well done." Hearing this, the two-seated officers scratched their heads in embarrassment. Izumo let out a wry smile. "Honestly, we didn't stand a chance against him. We barely escaped with our lives. But someone saved us. They were the ones who took down the barrier." "Someone saved you?" Masatsuki Ozaki's eyes widened. "Who is it? I owe them my thanks." "No need for that. If anything, I should be the one thanking you. You saved my life." A familiar voice came from behind. Masatsuki Ozaki turned around. It was a face he knew well, Sajun Kuichiki. Wrapped in bandages, he stood there with a gentle smile, his gaze warm. "So, how are you feeling? Need me to carry you to the 4th Division?" "Oh, it's Kuichiki-sensei." With a captain-level warrior by his side, Masatsuki Ozaki finally felt a real sense of security. "No need to carry me. I'm fine. This kind of wound won't kill me." "Alright, then at least get some rest." Sajun Kuichiki paused, then added, "Also, can you stop calling me Kuichiki-sensei? It sounds weird. Now that you're part of the 13th Division of Imperial Guards, just call me Captain Kuichiki, Lieutenant Sajun, or just my name." "You don't get it. Calling you sensei makes it feel more personal," Masatsuki said with a grin. "But if you don't like it, then fine, Lieutenant Sajun." Zanpakutō chuckled, shaking his head. You little brat. Hearing the way Masatsuki Ozaki addressed him, something seemed to cross his mind. Come to think of it, this is the first time we've met in person since you joined the 13th Division of Imperial Guards. I heard you became the 3rd seat of the 2nd Division. Then, I look forward to working with you, 3rd seat Ozaki. Likewise. Masatsuki Ozaki nodded with a smile. After saving Zanpakutō last time, the man had been recovering at home. This was indeed their first meeting since Masatsuki Ozaki joined the 13th Division of Imperial Guards. The night wind blew between them, carrying the lingering scent of blood. He suddenly snapped back to his senses. Wait. Zanpakutō blinked in confusion. What's wrong? Those two were captain-level Shinigami. Capturing them would be a huge achievement, Masatsuki Ozaki said. Aren't you going after them? One of them was seriously injured. They can't have gotten far, there's still time to catch up. Zanpakutō hummed in thought. With my current condition, I doubt I'd be able to keep up. But don't worry. They won't get away. I'm not the only one who's looking for you. Masatsuki paused, momentarily stunned. Meanwhile, on the other side, Rentaro gritted his teeth, seething with anger. What the hell happened? Why aren't those two dead? He was truly furious. All this time, and this guy couldn't even kill two mid-to-high-ranked seated officers. How useless could he be? Or were seated officers as terrifying as Masatsuki Ozaki now? At this rate, anyone could be a disciple of Genryu's Ishigakuni Yamamoto. Rentaro, is there something wrong with your head? Takasugi's eye twitched as he frowned, his tone laced with irritation. Didn't I already tell you? I ran into some trouble. His expression was just as unpleasant. He had saved this guy's life, and instead of being grateful, Rentaro had the audacity to question him? If it weren't for the fact that Rentaro was an important captain-level combatant, and that letting him die might lead to repercussions, Takasugi would have abandoned him long ago. He sneered. If you want to die so badly, just say the word. I'd be more than happy to leave you here and never give a damn about you again. Rentaro let out a cold snort but didn't argue further. He was willing to die for his ambition, but wanting to die and not fearing death were two different things. Now that he had barely escaped with his life, there was no point in throwing it away. Still, an uneasy feeling gnawed at him. Someone had managed to save those two seated officers from Takasugi's grasp. At the very least, that meant they were dealing with a captain-level Shinigami. And if that Shinigami caught up, Rentaro had no doubt that Takasugi would ditch him without hesitation. In his current state, if he was left behind, he wouldn't stand a chance. Takasugi, however, had no time to worry about Rentaro's thoughts. All that mattered now was getting out of here, fast. Before long, the two of them were just a step away from leaving the 6th district. Unknowingly, dawn had arrived. The sun rose steadily, its golden light spilling across the land, making the world feel fresh, almost hopeful. Caught up in the moment, both of them exhaled in relief. Finally, it was over. That thought echoed in their minds. Watching the sun rise, they couldn't help but smile. All the anger, all the resentment, it faded in an instant. Takasugi decided not to waste another second. He stepped forward, ready to leave this wretched place behind. But in the next instant, splurt. Blood sprayed into the air. Takasugi's leg gave out beneath him, and he collapsed onto the ground. What? A sharp, searing pain shot through his foot. Shocked, he looked down. The moment he had taken a step forward, something had pierced straight through the sole of his foot. Whipping his head around, his eyes landed on a pitch-black blade, emerging from the shadows behind him. Trying to run after doing something bad? A lazy voice rang out, echoing in their ears. Cold. Merciless. It sent a chill straight to their bones, like being dragged into an abyss. Chapter 78, Fatal Injuries. Takasugi and Rentaro's eyes widened in horror. A stern old man with white hair, a middle-aged man in a tattered straw raincoat, and a dark-skinned girl with a sneering grin. The three stood in the sunlight, clad in white hori, and walked up to them. You two have some nerve, daring to lay a hand on my people, Yaruichi Shioin sneered, cracking her knuckles with sharp clicks. Shun Sekiraku let out a long sigh. That kid Masatsuki always gets on my nerves, but at the end of the day, he's still my junior. If I just let this slide, the old man will chew me out again, and Lisa will be upset, too. Honestly. So why don't you two just stay put? At his words, Takasugi and Rentaro remained frozen, but Yoruichi Shioin's eye twitched slightly at the mention of Lisa Yadomaru. Jinrai Kuichiki cast a glance at the two younger men before silently stepping toward them. He had never been particularly good at dealing with younger people. And rather than wasting time lecturing an enemy, he much preferred to let his actions speak for him. Takasugi and Rentaro looked like they had seen a ghost, scrambling backward on the ground in a desperate attempt to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the three figures who had suddenly appeared. To them, these three were nothing short of monsters. And then, the monsters' spiritual pressure burst forth, raw and overwhelming. Their faces turned deathly pale. Boom. 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 Sensing the three powerful spiritual pressure, Masatsuki Ozaki looked up, grinning as he glanced toward the direction where the two captain-level Shinigami had fled. All familiar faces. With these three working together, even old man Yama would have a real fight on his hands. Masatsuki could clearly feel their spiritual pressure, but it was impossible to gauge the details of the battle just from that. Still, the outcome was already set in stone. Even if the entire force of the Tsunayashiro clan showed up, they wouldn't be able to take anyone from these three. Before long, under the curious gazes of Ryusui, Izumo, and the 6th Division members, Shun Sakuraku and Yoruichi Shioin approached at a leisurely pace. "Yoruichi," Masatsuki Ozaki called out. At the sound of his voice, Yoruichi Shioin grinned, waving at him before quickly making her way over. "Masatsuki, you okay?" Shun Sakuraku landed beside them with a sigh, exasperated. "You brat, I am here too, you know. I'm fine." Masatsuki held Yoruichi Shioin's hand, speaking softly to reassure her. Only after seeing her nod did he finally turn his head. "Oh, senpai, you're here too." Shun Sakuraku. "This kid, he's a completely different person when there's a woman around. If this keeps up, this senpai is really going to get mad." Shun Sakuraku was just about to make a snarky remark when Masatsuki Ozaki suddenly spoke with unusual seriousness. "Senpai, thank you." "Masatsuki, are you really okay?" Shun Sakuraku hesitated for a moment before asking. Masatsuki's expression was serious, but his body told a different story, covered in blood, swaying unsteadily. A deep gash ran across his chest, still bleeding, and his shoulder had a gaping wound. There was no way he was fine. Was this kid just trying to act tough so I wouldn't worry? Or was he showing off in front of Yoruichi? Masatsuki patted his chest, then promptly coughed up a mouthful of blood. Wiping his mouth with an indifferent expression, he said, "Just a scratch, nothing serious. The real problem is that I overexerted my spiritual pressure." "How did those two end up?" Kiraku glanced at him, then smiled. "One of the rebels, who was already badly injured, was, let's just say, accidentally killed by us. The other one was captured. Captain Kuichiki is escorting him to await trial by the Central 46. Masatsuki nodded, satisfied with the outcome. After all, both of them were captain-level opponents, it wouldn't be ideal to just kill them outright. This time, they had learned from past experiences and avoided saying anything they shouldn't. The one who survived was Takasugi. After taking a slash from each of the three, Kiraku, Jinrai Kuichiki, and Yoruichi, he wisely surrendered. As for Rentaro, his injuries were already severe, and before he even had the chance to beg for mercy, Yoruichi had cleanly beheaded him in a single stroke, an accident. Compared to Rentaro, who was accidentally killed, Takasugi was lucky. He got to keep his life, at least for now, and await the judgment of the Central 46. Though, who knew what kind of sentence they would hand down? Takasugi is such a coward. All it took was one slash, and he spilled everything without hesitation, Yoruichi scoffed in disdain. But Rentaro. Now he had guts. He knew exactly who you were and still had the nerve to come after you. Masatsuki raised an eyebrow. "So you killed him?" "It was an accident, just an accident." "You're not mad, are you?" Yoruichi waved a hand dismissively, sticking out her tongue. "Don't worry, I'll handle the Central 46. Why would I be mad? I'm actually relieved." Masatsuki shook his head. "If Takasugi hadn't shown up so early, I would have killed him myself. He had no intention of compromising with those who wanted him dead. If he showed weakness, people like them would only take advantage, and trouble would never stop coming. Anyone who wanted to kill him had to be prepared to pay the price. And the price of life was just right. By the way, little brother, you're pretty incredible, defeating a captain-level opponent." Shun Sakuraku grinned, spreading his hands in mock fear. "At this rate, give it a few years, and even I might not be able to beat you." Masatsuki shrugged and laughed. "Senpai, don't joke. I just got lucky. Besides, that Rentaro guy was nothing compared to the captains of the 13th Division of Imperial Guards." And that was the truth. The stronger one's spiritual pressure, the harder it was to progress. He wasn't entirely confident he could surpass Kiraku in just a few years. For now, he had the prisoners in the nest of maggots to use as sparring partners, so his training speed wouldn't slow down. But once he reached the third-class spiritual pressure level, then what? Going back to the nest of maggots would be inefficient. Sparring with Yoruichi? He couldn't go all out. It's not like he could just waltz into the central underground great prison either. At that point, his training speed would drop. He needed to figure something out. Masatsuki rubbed his chin, lost in thought, but no good ideas came to mind. He could only sigh in frustration. Kiraku, unaware of his inner turmoil, simply assumed his junior was feeling the effects of his injuries. Glancing at Yoruichi, who was fussing over Masatsuki, Kiraku suddenly had an idea. Captain Yoruichi, my dear junior is pretty banged up. I'll leave it to you to take him to the 4th division. Got it. Yoruichi immediately raised her hand. Masatsuki raised an eyebrow. And you, senpai? Planning to slack off? You little brat, how could you think so little of your senpai? Is that really the impression I give? Kiraku rolled his eyes. You think I have time to slack off? I need to stay behind and clean up this mess. And someone has to report everything to master, right? What's with that look? You don't trust me? How about this, you go report to master, and I'll go to the 4th division for you. Yeah, no thanks. That's not something you can just swap out. Masatsuki waved him off. Chapter 79, Successor to the Captain Commander Ukitake-senpai, what are you doing here? Masatsuki Ozaki watched as Rengeku Matsumoto and Jinakamaru left after their visit. The next moment, he saw a familiar figure, a handsome man with white hair being wheeled into the room and placed on a hospital bed. Yoruichi Shioin had left the 4th division early that morning. As the captain of the 2nd division, she had plenty of matters to handle. I haven't been feeling well these past few days and have been coughing up quite a bit of blood, so I'm here for treatment, Joshiro Ukitake said, leaning back against the bed before covering his mouth and coughing twice. Masatsuki Ozaki frowned in concern. Coughing up blood? That doesn't sound like a minor issue. It's just a little blood. Happens all the time. No need to worry, I'm used to it. Ukitake waved a hand dismissively with a smile. Masatsuki muttered, you're used to it. Then, suddenly snapping back to reality, he blurted out, don't get used to something that terrifying, senpai. Ukitake gave a faint smile, but before he could respond, a familiar voice cut in. Third seat Masatsuki, don't shout in the infirmary. You'll disturb the other patients. Yes, I know. The lingering memories from his past life told Masatsuki that raising his voice in a hospital really wasn't appropriate, so he shrank back slightly, feeling a bit guilty. Turning his head, he caught sight of someone familiar and widened his eyes in surprise. Seino Tsukimata? What the hell are you doing here? Huh? This is the 4th division. Why wouldn't I be here? Seino Tsukimata looked thoroughly unimpressed. Frankly, he would much rather be serving at Retsuo Nohana's side than looking after a couple of sickly patients. And another thing, Masatsuki, as the lieutenant of the 4th division, why do you think you can just call me by name? Masatsuki Ozaki scoffed. It's just one rank difference. A rank is a rank. I'm also a special advisor to the Shinigami Research and Development Institute, so technically, we should be on equal footing. The what? That sounds made up. Alright, you too, Ukitake interjected, sighing. As colleagues, you should value harmony. No need to argue. To his surprise, both Masatsuki and Seinosuke turned to him simultaneously and said in unison, Senpai, shut up. I know exactly what kind of guy this is, you cannot let him get away with things. Captain Ukitake, you should just focus on recovering. You can't keep showing up at the 4th division every other day. Ukitake instantly fell silent, shoulders slumping as if physically wounded. It was hard to say which of them had hurt him more. Speaking of which, as a noble, shouldn't you be receiving treatment at Shino Medical Institute? Masatsuki asked, puzzled. Idiot, Seinosuke scoffed. The Shino Medical Institute only treats members of the 4 great noble houses and the upper nobility. Captain Ukitake, as a lower noble, isn't eligible for treatment there. Hearing that, Joshiro Ukitake lowered his head even further in quiet defeat. You better show some respect to my senior. Masatsuki Ozaki snapped. He's a captain of the 13th Division of Imperial Guards, at the very least, he deserves a private room, right? Even if he knew Seino Tsukimata was just being sharp-tongued, the way he spoke made it hard to stay in a good mood. With everything that happened the night before last, you're lucky to even have a deluxe room, Seinosuke said flatly. You don't exactly have the right to be picky. If we can't change the room, at least get him a better caretaker. Masatsuki sighed in frustration. Why is it you of all people? Where's Captain Anohana? You? You think you're worthy of having Captain Anohana personally take care of you? Seinosuke sneered, showing no mercy. For once, Masatsuki didn't argue. Instead, he nodded. Right now, I'm not. But in the future? Who knows? In the future? What, are you planning to become the captain commander? Who can say? Masatsuki grinned. One of the attackers even called me the Captain Commander's successor. Joshiro Yukitake raised a hand. Masatsuki, don't you think it's a little inappropriate to say that out loud? Masatsuki shrugged. What's wrong with it? If Master knew his disciple was being recognized, he'd probably be proud. Well, technically, you're right. Any master would be happy to see their student succeed, but something about this just feels off. What feels off? I don't know, Yukitake admitted, shaking his head. If you don't know, then there's nothing wrong, Masatsuki declared matter-of-factly. So, there's nothing wrong. Is that how it works? Yukitake murmured, still feeling like something was amiss. Well then, should I be offering my congratulations, future Captain Commander? Despite his words, Sanosuke smirked mockingly as he shrugged. I'll take that as a blessing, Masatsuki said shamelessly, pretending not to notice the sarcasm. Ha. People hate Sanosuke because he loves making things difficult and has a terrible personality, but if you really look, he does have some good points. Don't talk like we're close, Sanosuke snorted. But now that I think about it, you're actually kind of an ass. Why do I have to deal with someone who only knows how to be verbally abusive? Masatsuki ignored him and muttered to himself. If Captain Anohana can't come, at least send someone cute, like third seat Aizen. Where do you get the idea that that big girl is cute? Sanosuke raised an eyebrow. Besides, compared to Aizen, you're basically a tiny guy. I'm not that short. You nasty people just don't get it. Masatsuki smirked, puffing out his chest. A tall figure like that isn't a bad thing at all. If anything, it makes Aizen even cuter. You're just a straight-up pervert, aren't you? Sanosuke groaned, feeling utterly exasperated. As he spoke, his eyes flicked toward the door. For a moment, he wasn't sure if he was hearing things, but it almost sounded like a soft thud. Outside the door, a woman sat on the floor, rubbing her forehead. She was tall, with golden eyes and short, slightly messy silver-gray hair, styled with a few thin braids. A pair of red striped earrings dangled from her ears. 4th Division's third seat, Aizen Kotetsu. Aizen, are you alright? Retsu Anohana stood before her, reaching out to help her up. I'm fine, Captain. Aizen quickly scrambled to her feet, her voice flustered. But your face is bright red. Are you feeling unwell? Anohana placed a gentle hand on Aizen's forehead. You feel a little warm. Are you running a fever? The moment she felt Anohana's touch, Aizen's face turned an even deeper shade of red. And no. I'm fine. I just accidentally spilled the medicine. She hurriedly looked down, staring at the scattered pills and vials on the floor. Anohana frowned slightly. Aizen was a bit timid and easily flustered, but spilling some medicine shouldn't have made her blush this much. Still, seeing Aizen quietly gathering the scattered supplies, Anohana decided not to press the issue. Instead, she turned her gaze toward the luxury ward. Chapter 80, Reward. So, where's Aizen? Masatsuki Ozaki asked. You've got some nerve. Aizen's older than you, and you're calling her that way? Sanosuke Yamada gave him a serious look and said, she went to get medicine. She should have been back by now. Maybe she's avoiding coming back because you're here. How can you even say that with a straight face? The most annoying person is sitting right in front of me, Sanosuke retorted. Masatsuki rolled his eyes. Still, Yukitake-senpai really has it rough, having to drink that bitter stuff every day. Not all medicine is bitter, you know, Sanosuke replied. And besides, this isn't for Captain Yukitake. You're joking, right? If it's not for my senior, then what, it's for me? Masatsuki pointed at himself, laughing dismissively. Do I look like someone who needs medicine? I'm perfectly fine. Sanosuke gave him a look filled with pity but said nothing. Masatsuki sensed something was off. When he glanced at his hands, he nearly jumped in shock. What hands? His arms were wrapped entirely in bandages, thick enough to resemble oversized cocoons. His actual hands were barely visible. When did this? When you passed out yesterday from spiritual power exhaustion, I personally treated and bandaged you. Sanosuke snorted. I really don't know how you managed to wreck yourself like this. Masatsuki smirked. Oh, are you worried about me? Then it clicked. He remembered. Renta Uroshikai didn't enhance his physical abilities, but those threads of his were absurdly tough. By the time Masatsuki finished beating him down, his own hands were nothing but torn flesh and blood. At the time, the situation was urgent, so minor injuries like that didn't seem worth worrying about. Sanosuke snorted again. You really think highly of yourself. I was just worried that the captain would be upset. Masatsuki asked, how long until I recover? Sanosuke stroked his chin, considering it for a moment. About half a month. Masatsuki raised an eyebrow. How did I even manage to do this? My hand bones were shattered in several places, and yet I walked in here like nothing was wrong. If you don't mind, how about letting me borrow your body? Sanosuke rubbed his chin, a thoughtful glint in his eyes. I'd love to dissect you, get a better understanding of your body's structure. Who knows? It might push Soul Society's medical and biological research forward. Masatsuki scoffed. Yeah, no thanks. Let's leave that noble cause to someone else. Rolling his eyes, he added, you're just trying to kill me. TCH. Kaon, huh? What a shame. Sanosuke clicked his tongue in disappointment and shook his head. Masatsuki sighed dramatically. This means I'll lose half a month of training. The guys in the nest of maggots are going to miss me. Sanosuke rolled his eyes again. Seriously injured, and the only thing this guy cares about is training? What a lunatic. The two continued chatting idly until there was a knock at the door. Sanosuke responded, and the door slid open. A beautiful woman with a gentle, serene presence stepped inside, closing the door softly behind her. Whether intentionally or not, Retsuo Hana completely ignored Sanosuke and Joshiro Yukitake. She walked straight to Masatsuki's bedside, glanced down at his hands, and furrowed her brows. Sanosuke Yamada shot up from his chair, straightening his posture before quickly reporting, Captain, third seat Masatsuki's treatment is mostly complete. He just needs to rest and recover now. Hearing this, Retsuo Hana gave a slight nod. Despite Sanosuke's abrasive personality, his medical skills were widely recognized, even the nobles had tried to recruit him away from the 4th Division. Still, Anohana didn't seem entirely reassured. Under the watchful eyes of the others, she performed Kaido, scanning Masatsuki Ozaki's body inside and out one more time before finally relaxing. She smiled as she took a seat beside his bed, nodding approvingly. You're recovering well. The wound on your chest has almost healed, and your spiritual power levels are stable. If nothing unexpected happens, the injuries to your shoulders and hands should be fully healed in about half a month. For now, avoid any strenuous activity and focus on resting. Yes. Masatsuki Ozaki replied, though his face was one of pure misery. Seeing his expression, Anohana couldn't help but find it amusing. At the same time, she felt a sense of relief. Feigning nonchalance, she said, I was at a 1st Division meeting earlier. I heard your opponent this time was captain level. And you defeated a captain level rebel. All on your own? Both Joshiro Yukitake and Sanosuke Yamada looked utterly shocked. They hadn't heard a word about this. Yukitake had arrived at the 4th Division before Masatsuki. The moment he heard his junior had been attacked, he had rushed over in a panic. As for Sanosuke, his rank simply wasn't high enough to be privy to such a major incident so soon. You already know? Masatsuki scratched his head sheepishly. Honestly, it was just a captain-level rebel. It wasn't that big of a deal. Sanosuke shot him a look of pure disdain. This guy? Embarrassed? Humble? Yeah, right. He was definitely showing off. Anohana turned back to Sanosuke and gave him a gentle smile. Sanosuke, step outside for now. Captain, Sanosuke opened his mouth to argue. He really didn't want to make Retsuo Anohana mad. But she simply shook her head, cutting him off. The next part of this discussion involves captain-level matters. Sanosuke froze for a second, then nodded in understanding before walking out of the room. The details of a captain's meeting weren't something just anyone could listen in on. Meanwhile, Joshiro Yukitake turned his head with great interest, perking up as if ready to take detailed notes. Anohana didn't stop him. It wasn't the first time he had missed a captain's meeting due to health reasons. So, what did you discuss? Masatsuki asked. Anohana smiled. Naturally, it was about the attack on you. The aftermath, the punishment for the rebels. And your reward. Oh? I'm getting a reward? Masatsuki looked genuinely surprised. During service in the 13th Division of Imperial Guards, accomplishments weren't typically rewarded directly. Instead, they were recorded and could influence future position transfers, usually after a Shinigami left their squad. Under normal circumstances, resigning from the 13th Division of Imperial Guards wasn't an option. There were only 2 ways a Shinigami could be forced out. The first was being deemed a threat by the Central 46 and exiled to the Nest of Maggots. The second was a formal transfer of position. After all, the Siriite AI functioned as the governing body of Soul Society, with numerous noble clans, the Central 46, the 13th Division of Imperial Guards, and various administrative and special departments. One such example was the Shino Medical Institute, which Masatsuki had mentioned before. In the original timeline, Sanosuke Yamada, despite his sharp tongue, had eventually left the 4th Division and become the Institute's director. For Masatsuki Ozaki, a currently serving 3rd seat of the 2nd Division, to receive a direct reward was practically unheard of. Chapter 81, Noble. Let me guess, Central 46 must have ensured Takasugi's survival, Masatsuki Ozaki said confidently. A captain-level combatant, There's no way the aristocrats would simply let him die. It didn't matter how many ordinary rebels perished, but every captain-class Shinigami lost was one too many. Retsuo Hana nodded, though her smile remained unchanged. The sinner, Takasugi Hirofumi, conspired to commit treason and disrupt the political order. He attempted to assassinate the third-seated officer of the 2nd Division of the 13th Division of Imperial Guards. His crimes are heinous. He is sentenced to 3,000 years of imprisonment in the nest of maggots. So that guy's name is Takasugi Hirofumi. And he really was spared. Masatsuki Ozaki muttered to himself, then suddenly froze as something felt off. Wait. He is being sent to the nest of maggots? With Takasugi Hirofumi's level of strength, he should have been confined to the central great underground prison. This isn't how a sentence reduction works. Anyone would know that the nest of maggots is under the jurisdiction of the Shioin clan, his jurisdiction. They were practically handing Takasugi Hirofumi's life over to him. By comparison, the central great underground prison would have been the safer option. The nest of maggots, however, was a place of danger. Has the Tsunayashiro clan lost their minds? Masatsuki Ozaki said, his expression turning odd. He couldn't make sense of their motives. On the surface, it looked like they were protecting Takasugi Hirofumi. But in reality, they might as well have been throwing him to the wolves. Joshiro Yukitake coughed twice, looking somewhat awkward as he said, Junior, speaking ill of the nobility could get you executed for disrespect. I know, senpai. Masatsuki Ozaki waved him off dismissively. Joshiro Yukitake let out a helpless, wry smile. This kid was far too much like Shun Sekiraku. I heard that this proposal came from a wise man of noble birth within the Central 46 compound, Retsuo Hana said, narrowing her eyes as her smile finally faded. Joshiro Yukitake seemed to recall something and remarked casually, from what I've heard, the relationship between the head family and the branch family of the Tsunayashiro clan has been strained in recent years. At his words, both Masatsuki Ozaki and Retsuo Hana glanced at him at the same time. They were both sharp enough to understand his implication instantly. Masatsuki Ozaki fell into thought but refrained from making any hasty conclusions. It wasn't that he doubted Joshiro Yukitake. But regardless of any divisions between the head and branch families, they were still the Tsunayashiro clan. Just how bad had things gotten between them for them to go this far? Takasugi Hirofumi's imprisonment in the nest of maggots, was it the result of a power struggle within the family, or was it simply a personal vendetta between relatives? He couldn't be sure. Maybe Takasugi Hirofumi had just done something to offend the head family. Masatsuki Ozaki couldn't help but ask, so, what's my reward? Money or a promotion, most likely. You defeated a captain-level rebel. Being a third seat is already quite a low position for that achievement, Joshiro Yukitake responded. Retsuo Hana shook her head and chuckled. Congratulations, third seat Masatsuki. As of today, you are a noble. Joshiro Yukitake. Masatsuki Ozaki? Are the Tsunayashiro clan guys out of their minds? Anohana and maybe you should check their heads for them. I killed their people, and they still made me a noble. What the hell is going on in those lunatics' heads? Masatsuki Ozaki laughed. Anohana and you're joking, right? Joshiro Yukitake's eyes widened. What kind of address was that? How dare you joke with her like that? Retsuo Hana, however, didn't seem to mind. She smiled and said, of course not. The Central 46 has issued an order, 2nd Division 3rd Seat Masatsuki Ozaki, for meritorious service in suppressing the rebellion, is to be granted the status of a lower noble. So now, I'm just another useless noble living off my title. Masatsuki Ozaki excitedly grabbed Anohana's hand. No one could blame him for his enthusiasm. Lower nobility wasn't a particularly high status. But becoming a noble meant officially gaining the right to own a personal Senkaiman. For an ordinary Shinigami to travel to the world of the living, they needed higher-up approval, and even then, they had to pass through designated Senkaiman. Nobles didn't have to follow those restrictions. This status would be incredibly useful to him. Anohana nodded with a smile. I heard you weren't too fond of nobles, little brother, Joshiro Yukitake said, tilting his head in confusion. You don't get it, Yukitake-senpai. That's because I wasn't a noble before, Masatsuki Ozaki raised an eyebrow. Now that I am one, of course I like it. Joshiro Yukitake's jaw dropped in disbelief, completely floored by Masatsuki Ozaki's flexible moral compass. Masatsuki, I came to see you. Yoruichi crouched by the window, her bright smile radiating energy that filled the room. Her gaze naturally followed Masatsuki Ozaki's hand, and when she noticed Retsuo Hana sitting beside the bed, she scratched her head awkwardly. Sorry, I didn't realize there was someone else here. Am I interrupting? The room fell silent. Masatsuki Ozaki suddenly felt the atmosphere turn tense. Jushiro Yukitake seemed to notice as well. Without a word, he reached over and pulled the privacy curtain around the bed. Masatsuki Ozaki caught his little maneuver, but under the gazes of two beautiful women, he couldn't stop him. He could only sigh internally. No wonder this guy is the one who'll propose the plan to monitor substitute Shinigami in the future. His ability to anticipate danger is insane. As expected, none of Genri Uzai's disciples are pushovers. Masatsuki Ozaki froze for 2 seconds, then silently withdrew his hand and pretended to be casual. Yoruichi, you finally made it. I've been waiting for you. Oh? Then what were you just? Yoruichi Shioin asked suspiciously. Retsuo Nohana let out a soft chuckle, gracefully folding her hands in her lap. Masatsuki just found out he's been made a noble, so he got a little excited. But what he did or didn't do, does that really have anything to do with Captain Yoruichi? Since when do the captains of the 13th Division of Imperial Guards oversee their subordinates' personal matters? Why wasn't I informed of this? What's with this tension? Anohana isn't Kukaku, so why are they acting like this? Masatsuki Ozaki couldn't figure it out, so he just pushed forward stiffly. Captain Anohana is right. I got a little carried away just now. My apologies, Captain Anohana. I was being too forward. Please don't take offense. Anohana caught the shift in how he addressed her and furrowed her brows slightly. Why would I be offended? Given our relationship, do we really need to mind such trivial things? At those words, Yoruichi narrowed her eyes. Are you two trying to get me killed? Masatsuki Ozaki wanted to cry. Right. Sword training naturally involves some physical contact. He reached for Yoruichi Shioin's hand but quickly realized that, in his current state, he couldn't even manage that. Seeing his pitiful expression, Yoruichi softened, just a little. But she still didn't give him an easy time. She sat down on the bed, grabbed his hand, and pouted. With injuries like these, and you still have the energy to think about nonsense? Then, she shot Anohana a glance. Chapter 82, Left Behind by Time. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm too weak, I don't have the kind of power you guys do. Masatsuki Ozaki looked down at his bandaged hands, his voice filled with frustration. If it were you facing Rentaro, you'd defeat him easily. Just like when you saved Sajun-sensei last time. I'm sorry, Yoruichi Shioin whispered. Hearing his words, she suddenly felt a wave of guilt wash over her. Her gaze fell on his hands, wrapped tightly in bandages, and her eyes reddened. Unable to hold back, she gently pulled Masatsuki Ozaki into an embrace. If only she had taken him with her to Shino Academy back then, maybe he wouldn't have ended up in this kind of danger. If she really thought about it, when did his conflict with the Tsunayashiro clan begin? It must have started after he saved Sajun Kuichiki. If he hadn't rushed onto the battlefield for her sake back then, he wouldn't be in this situation now. He wouldn't have to live every day under constant threat. She was the one who dragged him into this storm. And in the end, she failed to protect him. Yoruichi Shioin's heart sank. Masatsuki Ozaki let out a sigh of relief and smiled faintly. He reached up and gently stroked her back, his voice soft and reassuring. Come on, it's not a big deal. Look, I'm still here, aren't I? If you think about it differently, I defeated a captain-level rebel and got promoted to nobility. That's a win. We should be celebrating. Their positions shifted almost instantly. Just moments ago, Yoruichi had been fuming with anger. Now, she was nestled comfortably in Masatsuki Ozaki's arms, looking unexpectedly docile. Retsuo Nohana watched the scene unfold, her expression turning somewhat strange. She felt like she was struggling to keep up with the times. She simply couldn't understand the way these young people thought. But more importantly, she was starting to realize something about herself. That brief clash with Yoruichi earlier, why had she reacted that way? That wasn't like her at all. Oh, right, Yoruichi suddenly said, abruptly pulling away from Masatsuki Ozaki's embrace. She placed her hands firmly on his shoulders. What is it? Masatsuki Ozaki flinched at her sudden shift in energy. Wait. She didn't realize I was faking the whole pitiful act for sympathy just now, did she? I went to Sekizuki yesterday, Yoruichi said seriously. I asked him about the hot springs construction progress. Masatsuki Ozaki let out a quiet sigh of relief. So she didn't notice. But then, his eyes immediately lit up. A hot spring. He had been waiting for this for so long. If the hot spring was completed, he could push himself even harder during training without worrying about injuries. He could fight without holding back, something that would undoubtedly help his growth. So? Has Kisuke finished it? Masatsuki Ozaki asked eagerly. Yoruichi finally relaxed, a smile spreading across her face. It's basically done. It should be ready for use by next week. Masatsuki Ozaki rubbed his bandaged hand against his chin, sighing. Next week, huh? That means I still have to wait a whole week before I can use it. There's no need to be so impatient. The hot spring isn't going anywhere, Yoruichi huffed, pouting slightly. This guy's enthusiasm for the hot spring was clearly greater than any interest he had in her. You know I'm not the type to sit still. Being stuck like this is driving me crazy, Masatsuki Ozaki muttered, attempting to scratch his head, only to fail because of his bandaged hands. Yoruichi fell silent. She understood exactly how he felt. Because they were the same. If they weren't, they never would have earned the nickname Black and White Twin Devils. They were Sarietei's most infamous troublemaking duo. Masatsuki, you want to heal your injuries as soon as possible, right? Would you mind using some special methods? Retsu Anohana, who had been silent for a while, suddenly spoke up as she idly played with the braid resting on her chest. What kind of methods? The two asked in unison, their curiosity piqued. Anohana smiled gently. Now that I think about it, I've never shown you my shikai, have I? Actually, my shikai has the ability to rapidly heal wounds. Masatsuki Ozaki smacked his forehead, realizing how foolish he had been. After spending so much time with Anohana and always seeing her use healing techniques, he had completely forgotten that her Zanpakutō, Minazuki, had a natural healing ability. Then let's get started, Masatsuki said without hesitation. As long as it could heal him, getting swallowed by some strange creature didn't seem like that big of a deal. Yoruichi Shioin was momentarily stunned by his nonchalance, then shot him a sharp glare. You're seriously trusting her Zanpakutō to heal you just like that? This room is too small, Anohana shook her head. My Zanpakutō takes up a lot of space when released. Let's find an open area. No problem, let's head out now, Masatsuki agreed without hesitation. Yoruichi, still glaring at him, finally sighed. Fine. Let's go. From the ward to the garden, the scene was filled with the bustling members of the 4th Division tending to injured Shinigami from various squads. The 4th Division's hospital was packed. Seino Sakimata and Aizen Katetsu, who were usually only responsible for management, were now personally treating the wounded, drenched in sweat from the overwhelming workload. Amid the chaos, the occasional exchange of sharp words between Yamada and the other squad members could be heard, accompanied by Katetsu's hurried apologies trying to smooth things over. Anohana gave a small wave, and both Masatsuki and Yoruichi quickly approached her. Here? This spot will do. The garden is big enough. Step back, I'm going to release my Zanpakutō, Anohana instructed. Masatsuki and Yoruichi retreated to a safe distance. As soon as they stopped moving, Anohana glanced at them before drawing the curved blade from her waist. The moment she softly called out Minazuki's name, the blade rapidly transformed. In an instant, a massive, green, one-eyed manta ray materialized, floating in midair. Masatsuki Ozaki observed the enormous creature with great interest. Since arriving in this world, this was the first time he had seen a living, creature-type Zanpakutō in its released state. On the way here, Anohana had explained how Minazuki's healing ability worked. Now, as he stood before the large ray, which had opened its mouth wide, Masatsuki didn't hesitate. He swiftly removed his bandages and shrugged off the top half of his uniform. Then, with a powerful leap, he propelled himself into the creature's mouth, striking a dramatic flying kick pose as he did so. The moment he entered, he felt himself enveloped in something soft and slick, a strangely soothing sensation. What a shame there wasn't a bamboo pole or something similar nearby, otherwise, he would have loved to reenact that classic scene from The Lost World, Jurassic Park, where the hero pole vaulted himself straight into a dinosaur's mouth. The injured Shinigami standing around exchanged bewildered glances, all equally dumbfounded. Most of them had never seen Anohana's shikai before, nor did they know what it actually did. From their perspective, all they saw was a madman voluntarily diving into the mouth of a giant manta ray, who, for all they knew, was about to get digested and reappear in some horrific new form. Only two people remained unfazed, Retsu Anohana and Yoruichi Shioin. Anohana sat calmly atop Minazuki's back, gently stroking the creature with a serene smile. Time passed. No one knew exactly how long. Then, at last, Minazuki opened its mouth once again. Driven by curiosity, the onlookers turned to look, and collectively gasped. A dark-haired man suddenly emerged, leaping out of Minazuki's mouth. He spun a full 720 degrees in midair before landing smoothly on the ground. Then, as if finishing a grand performance, Masatsuki Ozaki stood upright, bowed gracefully, and gave a polite thank you, just like a gymnast concluding a flawless routine. Chapter 83, 3 questions a week passed quickly. Beneath the Sokyoku execution platform, in a secret underground training ground, the protective barriers had been upgraded, now allowing the use of all Kido below level 90. As Masatsuki Ozaki watched Yoruichi Shioin warming up, he unconsciously took off his robe. Masatsuki, Are you ready? Yoruichi asked seriously. Masatsuki's gaze was firm as he responded in a deep voice, I'm ready. Yoruichi slowly removed her jacket, revealing her toned, sun-kissed back. Thinking about what was about to happen, Masatsuki couldn't help but swallow hard. Noticing his reaction, Yoruichi gave a small nod and sat cross-legged on the ground. I originally planned to teach you Shunko after your spiritual pressure reached captain level, she said. But since you were able to defeat a captain-level rebel using Sokatsu, you already have the fundamental spiritual body requirements to wield Shunko. Faced with the opportunity to learn Shunko, how could any man resist? Just as that thought crossed his mind, Masatsuki couldn't hold back any longer. Let's get started, he said eagerly. Yoruichi was pleased with his enthusiasm. She nodded and spoke seriously. Let me put it simply. Normal hand-to-hand combats uses spiritual power to enhance speed and power, but it doesn't actually strengthen the spiritual body itself. Hand-to-hand combats is often called a physical technique, but in reality, it relies on spiritual power to propel the body, coordinating energy with movement to execute attacks. The body is merely a vessel for spiritual power, it's the energy itself that truly determines the impact. However, the Captain Commander's hand-to-hand combats focuses more on reinforcing the spiritual body. Instead of outward bursts of spiritual power, his technique internalizes it, amplifying the raw destructive power of the spiritual body itself. Shunko is similarly complex. It not only requires altering the properties of spiritual power but also demands complete synchronization between energy and a spiritual body. The principle behind Shunko is converting one's spiritual power into Kido of various attributes, wrapping it around the body, and then triggering controlled explosions to merge Kido and limbs into a singular, devastating force. In comparison to the Captain Commander's hand-to-hand combats, both techniques require immense physical endurance. The main difference lies in how the spiritual power is applied and how the attacks are executed. To put it simply, one is focused outward, while the other is focused inward. As expected of Soul Society's master of hand-to-hand combat, her explanation was clear and easy to understand. Masatsuki, who had dedicated himself to training in Yamamoto's style of hand-to-hand combats, understood immediately. This really suits me, he said with confidence. I have complete control over both Kido and hand-to-hand combat techniques. Yoruichi raised 3 fingers and smiled. There are 3 key aspects to training Shunko. First, spiritual pressure level. You've already met this requirement. Shunko doesn't actually demand a high spiritual pressure, lieutenant level is sufficient. I originally said you needed to reach 3rd class spiritual pressure because, at captain level, your body is further strengthened by the natural feedback of spiritual power, surpassing most seated officers and lieutenants in raw durability. Masatsuki waved a hand and laughed. Spiritual pressure is the source of a Shinigami's power. Raising it naturally enhances the body, I get that. Yoruichi chuckled and shook her head. Second, spiritual body resilience. Your spiritual body is already on par with a captain's, so that's not an issue. You're more than qualified to train in Shunko. Masatsuki let out a small breath of relief. This was the benefit of having a great teacher, he didn't have to worry about the training methods, and someone was always there to fine-tune the details. Yoruichi Shioin's expression remained serious as she said, the most important thing is the final point. Masatsuki Ozaki immediately straightened his posture, sitting up attentively. Yoruichi took a deep breath before continuing, you'll need to prepare a proper outfit, something sleeveless, preferably with an open back. Otherwise, every time you use Shunko, you'll end up destroying your clothes. It's a hassle. TCH. And here I thought you were going to talk about spiritual power synchronization or spiritual body coordination, Masatsuki scoffed, rolling his eyes. I'm quite good at taking off clothes. Huh? Yoruichi gave him a long look, her lips curving into a smirk. We're discussing serious business, and yet you still have time to flirt? Should I take it as proof of my overwhelming charm, or is it just you being shameless? How could he say something like that in front of a woman? She used to tease girls all the time, but it had been a while since she'd said something so brazen. Where is your mind going? I was talking about Master Yamamoto, Masatsuki quickly clarified, waving his hands before she could get mad. You forgot how Master doesn't like wearing a shirt when he fights? I've already asked him about the technique for quickly taking off clothes. Not to brag, but Master said I'm the best among his disciples. He even complimented the sleeve-tied bow I made, saying it was the most elegant one any of his students had ever crafted. If you don't believe me, I can show you, you little brat, don't start competing over something this ridiculous. Yoruichi cut him off with a shout, grabbing his face and rubbing it vigorously. I get it. Just let go, or my face is going to fall off, Masatsuki grumbled. But the more he begged, the more Yoruichi wanted to mess with him. Who told him to constantly piss her off? Besides, she knew full well how talented he was. If she didn't take the chance to bully him now, she might not get another opportunity in a few years. Masatsuki kept protesting, but his body betrayed him. The corners of his mouth were already curling up slightly. Getting bullied by a beautiful woman. Honestly, it didn't seem like such a bad thing. Still, he made a silent declaration to himself, I absolutely do not have any weird fetishes. Unaware of his inner thoughts, Yoruichi continued to torment him. They wrestled around for a while before finally letting go of each other, panting from the playful scuffle. Yoruichi sat on top of Masatsuki, arms crossed, exuding the confidence of a victorious warrior towering over her fallen opponent. Leaning slightly forward, she reached out, gave his cheek a light pat, and licked her lips. Just admit it, you're no match for me right now. Don't forget why we're here. Feeling the warmth of her breath so close, Masatsuki found his face heating up slightly. Yeah, I get it. Now get off me, he muttered, catching his breath. Good. Yoruichi smirked, satisfied. Now hurry up and train. Once we're done, we're going to enjoy that hot spring. It took a lot of effort to steal that thing, we still don't know if it actually works. Masatsuki chuckled. If it doesn't, we'll just go settle things with Gisuke. Ha. Good idea. It's been too long since I last gave Gisuke some trouble, Yoruichi grinned. Without further delay, the two began their Shunko training. Following Yoruichi's instructions, Masatsuki removed his top and demonstrated the bow-knot technique that even Master Yamamoto had praised. Yoruichi gave him an unenthusiastic compliment before moving straight to the real lesson, guiding him through the process of converting spiritual pressure into a Kido-based lightning attribute. For Masatsuki, this part wasn't too difficult. His Kido training had never slacked, and he could wield nearly all Kido spells up to level 90 with ease. The real challenge came in compressing the Kido and seamlessly merging it with his limbs. Chapter 84, Hot Springs. No surprise there, it's you, after all. You mastered Kido compression and wrapping in just one day. Yoruichi Shioin's voice carried a hint of amusement, followed by the gentle sound of water rippling. Something seemed to explode in Masatsuki Ozaki's mind, boom, and clarity returned to his gaze. He lifted a hand to cover his eyes. You coming in? I'm not wearing anything. Lying in the underground training hall's hot spring, he rested his head on a towel, leaning back against a large stone. This was, without a doubt, Gisuke Urahara's most useful invention yet, a recovery hot spring inspired by Kirinji Tenjiro's White Bone Hell and Blood Pond Hell. And Gisuke had not let him down. Masatsuki had only been soaking for a few seconds, yet the injuries from his Shunko training had already healed almost completely. Don't be shy. Yoruichi crouched at the edge of the spring, dipping her foot into the water to test the temperature. She glanced at Masatsuki, who seemed innocent as he covered his eyes, and pouted in annoyance. Did he really think he was fooling anyone? Anyone could tell he was totally peeking. Would it kill him to show a little respect and at least press his fingers together to make the gaps smaller? After hesitating for a moment, she feigned indifference, loosening her sash and slipping out of the form-fitting on Mitsukido uniform. In the blink of an eye, the dark-skinned beauty sat at the hot spring's edge, her delicate legs fully submerged in the water. If you're this embarrassed, why even try to act tough? Masatsuki thought to himself. Though Yoruichi appeared relaxed on the surface, the telltale redness creeping up her ear said otherwise. There was no mistaking it, she was flustered. At this point in time, Yoruichi wasn't as uninhibited as she would be in the future. No, if anything, after observing her for so long, Masatsuki had noticed something odd. Instead of becoming more carefree, her sense of embarrassment had only increased over time. She was getting more easily flustered, not less. That wasn't how it was supposed to be. It was a strange realization because, in the original timeline, Yoruichi was never like this. Of course, there was nothing wrong with it. But the problem was, this version of Yoruichi made him feel something. Something he hadn't expected. And it led to a strange thought. He didn't want her to become the person she was supposed to be. Yoruichi, meanwhile, seemed to realize that her body temperature was spiraling out of control. With a quick push off the ground, she plunged headfirst into the hot spring with a plop. She tried to say something, lips parting slightly, but all Masatsuki could hear were bubbles rising to the surface. Cute. Watching her, Masatsuki suddenly spoke. Yoruichi. Her body tensed slightly. Half her face remained submerged, golden eyes blinking curiously up at him. Seriously, calling my name out of nowhere like that? You trying to give me a heart attack? She exhaled, surfacing just enough to take a deep breath before casually swimming over to Masatsuki's side. Then, without hesitation, she draped an arm over his shoulder in a casual, brotherly gesture. Though, judging by the way her flushed cheeks were rapidly turning crimson, and how that blush was creeping down her neck, she wasn't nearly as composed as she pretended to be. The last time I saw you this honest must have been about a year ago, Masatsuki Ozaki said, his tone laced with nostalgia. Yoruichi Shioin blinked in surprise before forcing out a laugh, trying to sound nonchalant. However, her voice trembled slightly. Nonsense. I don't remember anything like that. Or, are you saying you peeked at me at some point, huh? Masatsuki chuckled. You've forgotten? Our first meeting, back at Shino Academy, in my dormitory. Yoruichi paused before realization dawned. Oh, that time. She waved a hand dismissively. Didn't I already tell you? A cat's fur is its clothing. That doesn't count as honest. Masatsuki lowered his hands from his face, his gaze meeting hers. Then, he swam closer, grasping her arm with a serious expression. Yoruichi. What happened today? You can't do this in front of anyone else. Yes, he knew he had no right to say this. Yes, he knew it was selfish. But even so, he didn't regret it. In fact, he was almost relieved that it was him saying it. What happened today? Yoruichi tilted her head in confusion. You mean Shunko? But I've already taught Yashiro. No. Masatsuki shook his head firmly, his eyes locking onto hers. I mean this. Us. The way we are right now. Under the intensity of his gaze, something seemed to click in Yoruichi's mind. And, very uncharacteristically, she faltered. Her laughter came out uneven, hurried. Oh. Ha. Ha. Ha ha ha. I knew it. I knew it. You totally have a crush on me. Now that I've put a little pressure on you, you finally slipped up. No way you can hide it anymore. Her laughter was loud, but her trembling voice made Masatsuki feel as if she might start crying at any moment. But he didn't rush her for an answer. He simply watched her. Under his steady gaze, Yoruichi's flushed face only deepened in color. But her frantic movements gradually calmed until she sat still in the water, looking almost timid. Like a cornered kitten. All right. I get it. I'll behave. She sighed, turning her face away. Just stop looking at me like that. That was her answer. Masatsuki exhaled. What a terrible answer. It made it sound like their relationship had taken a weird turn. Damn it. Yoruichi sank lower into the water, her face nearly disappearing beneath the surface. The amount of bubbles rising to the top only increased. She stayed like that for so long that Masatsuki couldn't help but admire her lung capacity. At the same time, he felt his own tension slowly unwinding. Before he had said those words, he had already been fairly certain of Yoruichi's response. But still, getting the answer out of her brought him an unexpected sense of relief. Glancing at her again, he figured she needed a moment. So, he swam to the side, leaned back against a rock, and closed his eyes. In truth, he had been nervous just now and needed to relax. It was unclear how long the silence lasted when Masatsuki Ozaki suddenly felt something poking him. Poke, then scratch, again and again, the sensation growing in number, tickling him. He opened his eyes and saw Yoruichi Shioin racing her finger across his chest. A sudden jolt ran through him as a memory from his past life surfaced, a scene from a comedy film. In it, the female lead possessed strange supernatural powers, allowing her to converse with the male lead's conscience. What was she doing? Was she trying to ask his conscience if it loved her? Well, he knew himself well enough. His conscience would undoubtedly say yes. But she wasn't the only one it would give that answer to. Masatsuki noticed her gaze growing hazy, her breathing turning uneven. Blushing slightly, Yoruichi murmured, Masatsuki, even though you have a fourth-class spiritual pressure, you defeated a captain-class opponent. So, in a way, that makes you captain-class too, doesn't it? Well, I guess so. As the words left his mouth, Masatsuki froze. Yoruichi's face was drawing closer. Their bodies were closing the distance as well. Chapter 85, Gift-giving. A few hours passed, and morning had arrived. They were still in the underground training ground. My spiritual pressure has improved again. Masatsuki Ozaki murmured excitedly, stirring the spiritual power within him. The effort he had put into hand-to-hand combat training hadn't been in vain. Despite staying up all night, he was still full of energy. Behind him, Yoruichi Shioin was fast asleep, wrapped in the haori that symbolized the authority of the 2nd Division captain. She slept soundly, a satisfied smile lingering at the corner of her lips. Masatsuki glanced at her sleeping figure, then turned to check the clock in the training hall. It was already getting late. As if sensing his gaze, Yoruichi's eyes slowly fluttered open. Since Masatsuki had his back to her, she immediately got up and draped herself over him, resting against his back. Like a smitten young woman, she gazed at him with eyes full of affection and contentment. Did I wake you? Masatsuki turned his head slightly and reached out to touch her face. Yoruichi, like an affectionate cat, tilted her head and rubbed against his neck before playfully flicking out her tongue for a quick lick. "What time is it?" she asked softly, her voice carrying an alluring charm, completely different from her usual mischievous demeanor. If he had to describe it, it was the difference between a woman and a girl. "It's already past noon," Masatsuki replied, adjusting his grip as he lifted her onto his back. Despite her usual confident, commanding presence, Yoruichi was actually quite petite, barely 1.6 meters tall. As she clung to him, her feet dangled in the air like a koala hanging from a tree. He held her up not to take advantage of her but simply because he didn't want her to get tired hanging there. After all, everything that should and shouldn't have been done between them had already happened. At this point, trying to steal such a trivial advantage would just seem petty. Hearing his words, Yoruichi's eyes widened in shock. She quickly turned her gaze past Masatsuki and looked at the ticking clock. "It's work time," she blurted out, immediately jumping off him. Masatsuki stared at her, speechless. This woman always looked for excuses to slack off whenever possible, so why was she suddenly so eager today? "Did you forget? We took a month off to train in Shunko, and Master approved it," Masatsuki reminded her, exasperated. It felt like she had lost a few brain cells overnight. "Oh, right." Yoruichi took a step forward, and any trace of her previous shyness had completely vanished. With no concern for modesty, she casually ran her hand along his chin. "Omeda and Ikamaru can handle everything. We can just enjoy our well-earned break." "Enjoy? Don't forget why we took this leave in the first place," Masatsuki retorted. "How am I supposed to train in this state?" "We should soak in the hot spring first to loosen up," Yoruichi said with a contented smile, shrugging. "I just hope it's still usable." After an intense night of training between two hand-to-hand combat specialists, the hot spring had undergone some drastic changes. "It should be fine," Masatsuki said, watching the water gradually clear. His tone carried a subtle meaning. The artificial rock formation by the hot spring continuously released a steady stream of fresh water, replenishing the pool. Anything crafted by Kusagakure Hera was bound to be top-notch. As expected, he had accounted for everything. The hot spring's circulation system was flawless. Beneath the pool lay an extensive filtration system. Once purified, the water would flow back through the rock formation, allowing it to be reused efficiently. Yoruichi nodded in satisfaction before excitedly leaping into the hot spring. She let out a delighted laugh. "This feels amazing. Masatsuki, hurry up." Watching her splash around in the water, Masatsuki smiled slightly before following her in. Before long, the two of them drifted closer together. Today was going to be a very enjoyable day. Saireitai, Central District, 1st Division Headquarters. Yamamoto sat in the captain's office, silently listening as Chojiro Sasaki and Ranjaku Matsumoto delivered their reports. Ranjaku Matsumoto was now the 7th seat of the 1st Division, serving as Sasaki's assistant. Yamamoto glanced at her, feeling a tinge of emotion. Masatsuki really was fortunate to have such a girl by his side. He was well aware of their relationship. However, what concerned him more than their personal affairs was her talent. She had graduated early from Shino Academy and, within less than half a year of joining the 13th Division of Imperial Guards, had already reached 6th class spiritual pressure. That level of talent was second only to Masatsuki Ozaki, a rare genius seen once in a millennium. People often underestimated 6th class spiritual pressure. In most divisions, it was enough to secure a position as the 3rd or 4th seat. But this was the 1st Division, the most elite unit in the entire 13th Division of Imperial Guards. Lieutenant Chojiro Sasaki was strong even among captains. The officers ranked 3rd to 6th either had captain-level spiritual pressure but had yet to master Benkei, or were lieutenant-level Shinigami. Even though Ranjaku's spiritual pressure had reached the level of a top-tier seated officer, in the 1st Division, she could only hold the 7th seat. Yamamoto's eyes flickered slightly, and he let out a quiet sigh. He still remembered when Masatsuki had recommended Ranjaku for the 1st Division. He had been quite displeased at the time. He had been training Masatsuki as his disciple, and yet the boy, who hadn't even fully established himself yet, was already busy helping others climb the ranks. What kind of master would be happy about that? Now, he realized he had misjudged him. Sending such a gifted recruit into his care wasn't nepotism, it was a show of faith in his master's ability to cultivate talent. That brat, always causing him trouble, still knew to rely on his master when it truly mattered. As these thoughts passed through his mind, the stern expression on Yamamoto's face softened. His gaze toward Ranjaku turned kinder, more like an elder indulging a favored junior. "Captain Commander, the Tsunayashiro clan elders sent a messenger last night with quite a few gifts," Ranjaku reported as she reviewed the documents in her hands. "For Masatsuki?" Yamamoto asked. "Some were meant for 3rd seat Masatsuki, but most were for you," Ranjaku nodded. They've even prepared a mansion for him in the noble district. Yamamoto remained silent, his expression unreadable. Even he couldn't quite grasp what those nobles were thinking. Who gifts things to their enemies? On the surface, they were all allies, working together to uphold the order of Soul Society. But in reality, the distinction between ally and enemy was often paper-thin. If anything, they should be figuring out how to eliminate their opponents, not sending them presents. Chojiro Sasaki frowned. Should we return the gifts? They went out of their way to deliver them in secret at night, clearly not wanting anyone to find out. That can't be a good sign. Yamamoto considered for a moment before tapping his cane against the floor. His eyes grew sharp as he spoke in a deep voice, no need. Let Masatsuki accept them. I want to see exactly what they're planning. Chapter 86, Nata Quincy soaking in the hot spring with Yoruichi Shioi nestled in his arms, her face flushed with warmth. Masatsuki Ozaki couldn't help but narrow his eyes in satisfaction. This was the life he had always dreamed of. Why strive for power if not to live a carefree and fulfilling life? Though he hadn't been practicing Shunko lately, he had refined his spiritual pressure. It wasn't wasted time. Masatsuki let himself bask in the hot spring's restorative effects, feeling the soothing warmth wash over him. The restorative hot spring was a replica of the White Bone Hell and Blood Pond Hell, but naturally, it couldn't compare to the originals. The true White Bone Hell and Blood Pond Hell had been created using the spiritual pressure of Tenjiro Garanji. Since Gisukura Hera couldn't obtain a spiritual pressure of equivalent potency, he had substituted other materials to produce a similar effect. The difference in materials meant the effects were much weaker, but on the upside, the side effects were also reduced. Even so, it was more than enough to replenish their energy after a physically exhausting night. In less than a quarter of an hour, both Masatsuki and Yoruichi felt revitalized, as if they could go another 300 rounds. Masatsuki stood up, stretching a bit in the water, a satisfied smile forming on his lips. Fully recovered. Now it's time to get serious, I can't keep indulging like this. He made up his mind to resume Shunko training. A Shinigami's lifespan could stretch for thousands of years, there would always be time for other forms of exercise. But Shunko? That was a direct path to real power. And in the world of Bleach, strength was the only true currency for survival. Yoruichi also stood, stretching her arms overhead without reservation. She rolled her shoulder and rotated her arm twice, working out any lingering stiffness from the night's strenuous activity. The soreness that had built up from maintaining high-intensity movements for hours had completely faded in the hot spring's warmth. She felt refreshed and ready. All right, I'm good too. Let's get started. With that, Yoruichi flickered from the hot spring, swiftly dressing before flashing Masatsuki a playful wink. Masatsuki was pleased, this was the energetic, unrestrained Yoruichi he knew. That liveliness was part of what made her so captivating. He cast her a glance before pulling on his pants, neatly folding his shirt and setting it aside. Shunko training would make wearing a shirt pointless. He'd only have to take it off again later, so why bother? The two of them stood facing each other in the training hall. Yoruichi's shoulders pulsed with streaks of white, lightning-like spiritual pressure. A faint glow surrounded her as she extended a hand toward Masatsuki. He blinked, hesitating for a moment before realizing she was inviting him to take it. Then, without warning, she reached out with her other hand, pulling him into her embrace. Looking up at him, she smiled. Masatsuki wanted to treat this as part of their training, but he had a feeling Yoruichi was just teasing him. She was the type to be willful when she wanted to be. Once she decided to play around, there was no stopping her. He gave in, wrapping his arms around her, and in doing so, he suddenly became aware of just how soft she was, like a cat curling up against him. Yoruichi's expression shifted ever so slightly, her eyes softening with something unreadable. Whatever had put her in such a good mood, Masatsuki wasn't about to question it. Hey, stop squirming. Focus on training and feel my spiritual pressure. Yoruichi was in an exceptionally good mood today, and she took it as a good sign. She suddenly felt that life could be even more enjoyable in the future, and a wide grin spread across her face. She remembered the promise she had made to him and looked up. Sure enough, the expression on that petty man's face had shifted. She didn't dislike it, though, if anything, she found a small sense of delight in it. Masatsuki Ozaki frowned in frustration. You didn't teach Yashiro like this, did you? Yoruichi shook her head and smirked. Are you an idiot? I've only ever used this method on you. But you're really cute when you're mad. I like it. Masatsuki's frown eased, but something felt off. Normally, he was the one saying things like this to Yoruichi. Now the tables had turned. Yoruichi, you're cute too. And I like you as well. Masatsuki pulled her into a tight embrace. Yoruichi seemed caught off guard. A faint blush dusted her cheeks, and her golden eyes darted away, unable to meet his gaze. "Focus on training," she muttered, biting her lip. There was a mix of pride and embarrassment in her voice. "This isn't the time for sweet talk." Masatsuki nodded. She was still the same as always. That was a relief. He loosened his grip slightly, closed his eyes, and focused on sensing Yoruichi's spiritual pressure. Yoruichi studied his concentrated expression, a soft smile tugging at her lips. In a gentle voice, she whispered, "Relax, don't be tense. Remember, your spiritual pressure is you. Your spiritual body is you. It's all a part of Masatsuki Ozaki. You need to fully engage your sixth sense, spiritual awareness, to perceive the changes in Kido spiritual pressure. Once it takes form outside your body, try to draw it in, merging it with yourself. Think of it as your bones, your blood, your limbs." Her voice was as light as a breeze, brushing against Masatsuki's ear and echoing softly in his mind. As she spoke, the noise around them gradually faded into silence. The once present background sounds disappeared, leaving only a deep, peaceful stillness. Within this quiet, Masatsuki became increasingly aware of a distinct power, spiritual pressure. It wasn't visible to the naked eye, yet it was undeniably there, surrounding him. It felt like an invisible field, enveloping him completely. At this moment, his perception of spiritual pressure sharpened. It grew stronger, more distinct, its presence impossible to ignore. In the world of Bleach, spiritual awareness was a unique ability, what could be considered a sixth sense, beyond the five conventional human senses of sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. To put it simply, spiritual awareness was the ability to perceive spiritual pressure. Those with a strong spiritual awareness could detect fluctuations in the spiritual pressure around them and even gauge an opponent's strength through it. However, despite its impressive nature, spiritual awareness wasn't omnipotent. Shinigami often relied on it in battle to track enemy movements and gain an advantage in combat. But against masters skilled in concealing their spiritual pressure, its effectiveness diminished significantly. In battle, it was nearly impossible to fully suppress one's spiritual pressure. However, for true experts, masking their presence outside of combat was a trivial feat. Masatsuki attempted to merge his spiritual pressure with his body. His heart pounded. A strange sense of familiarity washed over him. Yet he knew he had never trained in Shunko before. The closest thing he had done was synchronizing his spiritual pressure with his physical movements while using Ikatsu and Sokatsu. The sensation was similar, but at its core, it was completely different. Suddenly, white arcs of electricity erupted from his shoulders and back, crackling violently. The surrounding rishi surged toward him, drawn into his body at an alarming rate. The lights in the training hall seemed to shine even brighter. He was absorbing rishi from the environment. This was a technique he had only ever seen in Mayuri Kurotsuchi's research notes. A technique that belonged to the Quincy. But he wasn't a Quincy. He was a Shinigami. This ability shouldn't be his. Chapter 87, Shunko. Why can I absorb rishi from the outside world? Am I a Quincy? No, after I died in the world of the living, my soul didn't return to Hueco, nor was it captured by that mad scientist. My soul is exceptional. If I were a Quincy, that deadbeat loan shark Hueco wouldn't have let me go, even without consciousness. So, that means I'm not a Quincy. Oh well, even if I'm not, this ability is way too similar to a Quincy's. Master won't skin me alive when he finds out, right? He doesn't seem too fond of Quincy's. Masatsuki Ozaki's mind raced through countless thoughts in an instant. Regardless of how the old man would react, he decided to stop drawing rishi from Soul's society, at least for now. Masatsuki Ozaki released his control over the rishi. A crackling surge of thunder filled the air, accompanied by the sharp sound of air being sucked in. The sensation caught Masatsuki Ozaki off guard, but rather than discomfort, he felt a rush of exhilaration. Masatsuki. Yoruichi Shioing finally noticed something was off. Masatsuki Ozaki blinked. What's wrong? Did she notice me absorbing rishi? How should I explain this? I can't exactly say I was running low and just borrowed some from Soul Society. Yoruichi doesn't have any real grudge against Quincy's. Maybe I should just tell the truth? As he mulled it over, temptation stirred within him. Still, this time, he was smart enough not to blurt out an answer. Instead, he waited for Yoruichi to finish speaking. You did it, Shunko was a success. Yoruichi Shioing exclaimed, releasing his arm in surprise. So it was Shunko. Masatsuki Ozaki felt power surging through him. He glanced at his shoulder and, sure enough, saw streaks of lightning-like spiritual pressure coursing through his body. Not only did the lightning not harm him, but it moved at his command, as naturally as an extension of his own limbs. He hadn't trained for this, yet it felt as effortless as moving his hands or feet. I did it. I really am a genius. Masatsuki Ozaki declared without hesitation. Without a second thought, he swung his fist, sending shockwaves rippling through the air. Indeed, no surprise there. Your talent makes this only natural. Yoruichi acknowledged his boast without dispute. It was, after all, common knowledge. How about a spar? It's been a while since we last trained here. Masatsuki Ozaki flashed her a playful wink. Yoruichi Shioin's interest was piqued. Without hesitation, she activated Shunko again, lightning sparking from her back. The training hall was brightly lit, still, and windless. Masatsuki, your spiritual pressure isn't on my level, but don't worry, I'll hold back. Yoruichi spoke with confidence. I'll suppress my spiritual pressure to match yours, but for a spar. Why don't we make a little wager? A wager? Masatsuki Ozaki tilted his head. On what? Yoruichi leaned in close, whispering something in his ear. What? As the Captain Commander's disciple, there's no way I'm submitting to that. Masatsuki Ozaki exclaimed, utterly shocked, but he refused to admit how tempting the idea was. You can name your own stakes too, if you want. Yoruichi licked her lips, her expression like that of a cunning little devil, tempting him further. All right, fine. I accept, Masatsuki Ozaki relented. But I haven't decided on my terms yet. I'll let you know later. As a student of Genri Uzai, he had inherited one of Yamamoto's finest traits, absolutely no sense of shame. With the wager set, the two took their positions on opposite sides of the training ground. Yoruichi wasted no time. In a flash, her figure blurred into motion, streaking toward Masatsuki Ozaki like a shadow. She had her own reasons for proposing a bet. Masatsuki had only just learned Shunko, he was still unfamiliar with its intricacies. She intended to overwhelm him quickly, forcing him into a position where he'd have no choice but to concede. After all, they had taken an entire month off. That meant over 20 days of uninterrupted freedom. Of course, she had to make the most of it. Boom. Their palms collided, producing a deep, resonating impact. So fast. Masatsuki Ozaki's heart tightened. Yoruichi Shioin's palm strike was both swift and heavy. If this had been before he mastered Shunko, he would have been forced to counter with Ikatsu. Ikatsu was undoubtedly stronger, but this palm strike surpassed ordinary hand-to-hand combat's techniques. Comparing the two, Ikatsu was a burst-type technique, packing immense power in a single strike. Shunko, while weaker in raw force, allowed for continuous attacks. Masatsuki Ozaki steadied himself, not daring to let his guard down. Boom. 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 The two figures clashed in rapid exchanges, their battle unfolding across the training hall. Hand-to-hand combats relied on sharp vision, swift reflexes, and seamless coordination of hands, eyes, body, mind, and footwork. Yoruichi Shioin was undeniably a master of hand-to-hand combats, her skills honed to the highest level. But Masatsuki Ozaki was no longer the novice he had once been. Having inherited Yamamoto's teachings and undergone extensive training, he was no stranger to combat. Despite Yoruichi's lightning-fast, precise movements, he quickly adapted. At that moment, Masatsuki Ozaki's spiritual perception confirmed that Yoruichi had indeed unleashed her full spiritual pressure, only to suppress it again. He knew he could replicate her movements, but his body hadn't fully adjusted yet. Even simple punches and kicks still felt unnatural. The battle raged on. On the surface, Masatsuki Ozaki appeared increasingly at ease. And in truth, he was. With each block and counter, he refined his control over his body. Meanwhile, Yoruichi had shed her usual carefree demeanor. Now fully engaged in battle, she exuded a sharp, natural intensity. Her movements radiated an inherent sense of danger. A flurry of precise punches and kicks gradually cornered Masatsuki Ozaki, limiting his space to dodge. Then, Yoruichi suddenly called out, "Rei Taisho!" Sizzle. She raised her palm, crackling with electricity, thunder echoing from her fingertips. What the hell? Masatsuki Ozaki froze for a split second. I'm not a zombie, why are you hitting me with palm thunder, Rei Taisho? Wait. Isn't that a name I casually mentioned while telling a story? Did she develop this move based on my ideas? With no room to evade, Masatsuki Ozaki didn't retreat. Instead, he unleashed his spiritual pressure, channeling its lightning properties into his palm to meet her attack head-on. Boom. A deep, resounding impact echoed through the hall as both fighters were blasted backward, skidding to a stop several dozen meters apart. Ordinary hand-to-hand combats bouts weren't this destructive. But Shunko was no ordinary hand-to-hand combats. Every strike carried tremendous force, casual movements alone could shatter stone and split the ground. If Masatsuki hadn't instinctively managed to condense his own version of Rei Taisho at the last second, he would have been the only one sent flying. Though his right arm ached from the impact, Yoruichi's expression remained exhilarated. She smirked, refusing to admit defeat. Reitaisho is just a minor trick. I've got even stronger moves you haven't seen yet. Masatsuki Ozaki, well accustomed to Yoruichi's competitive nature, simply waved her on. Bring it on, Yoruichi. Chapter 88, Entei Rumble. Crushed rocks tumbled down one after another, kicking up a massive cloud of dust. Masatsuki Ozaki, lightning crackling around his feet, lightly pushed off the ground, dodging a lightning-coated hand strike. He chuckled, so, these are the stronger moves you were talking about? Yoruichi Shioin, standing before him, suddenly lowered her head. Seeing her shoulders tremble slightly, Masatsuki Ozaki thought, don't tell me she's actually mad. Just as he was about to offer some half-hearted words of comfort, Yoruichi abruptly lifted her head, a wicked grin spreading across her face. You've improved fast, kid, but I'm not giving up. Today, I'm going to make sure you understand just how strong your captain really is. Guess I was overthinking it. Masatsuki Ozaki sighed inwardly before saying, I already picked up that hand strike of yours. Got anything else? Yoruichi immediately clenched her fists. Don't get cocky. Palm Thunder is just a little trick I use for trimming hedges. I haven't even shown you my real trump card yet. She developed a technique just for gardening? What happened to all the Shioin servants? Masatsuki Ozaki clearly didn't believe her. Even stubbornness should have its limits. Shaking his head, he smirked. A trump card, huh? Then hurry up and show me. I'd love to learn it. Yoruichi hesitated for a moment before shaking her head. Masatsuki Ozaki exaggerated a dramatic sigh. Holding back on me? That hurts, you know. He grinned shamelessly. He knew Yoruichi wouldn't hesitate during a fight. He was certain she had no hidden techniques, just a lot of pride. Crossing her arms, Yoruichi huffed, I haven't fully mastered it yet. I don't want to accidentally hurt you. You should be grateful. If I were you, I'd just surrender. Her serious expression made Masatsuki Ozaki pause. For a moment, he wasn't sure if she was bluffing. You really have a trump card? Then hurry up and show me. He narrowed his eyes. Or, do you not believe in my strength? Relax. As long as you don't cheat and unleash your full spiritual pressure, I can block anything you throw at me. He sounded absolutely confident. If Yoruichi truly had a powerful technique, he wanted to see it for himself. And that's when he realized he had walked straight into a trap. Yoruichi's gaze flickered mischievously, a sly smile creeping onto her lips. She hesitated, just a little, before saying, But this move is really powerful. I haven't completely mastered it yet. Masatsuki Ozaki stepped forward, full of momentum. I've beaten a captain already. What's there to be afraid of? Yoruichi's eyes lit up. Then let's make a bet. Masatsuki was mid-boast about his future dominance over Soul Society when her words caught him off guard. What kind of bet? The wager is simple, our sparring sessions will last until the end of the holiday. 10 days. That's my limit. Masatsuki Ozaki hesitated, but after thinking it through, he realized he wasn't exactly at a disadvantage. Also, if I win, I get to make 2 requests. Deal, Yoruichi agreed without a second thought. Masatsuki Ozaki froze. Wait. Did I just get played? Yoruichi Shioin continued, just so we're clear, once you agree, there's no backing out. Of course, Masatsuki Ozaki nodded. A man's word is final. Though he hardly considered himself a man of honor, he had no intention of going back on the deal. Yoruichi flashed a smug grin. Before we start, a little warning, when I go all out with this move, I can level a small hill. Masatsuki Ozaki was stunned. In an instant, he sensed the shift in Yoruichi's aura. She wasn't joking, she fully intended to take him down. Licking his lips, he thought, she's been leading me into this step by step. So this is what she was waiting for. Maybe I should just surrender? It's not like I'd be losing anything. Forget it. If she's got something that strong, I might as well watch. Just as that thought crossed his mind, Yoruichi's aura surged dramatically. Get ready to take this head on. Thunder raged around her. Shunko, Rage and Kenbu. The crackling electricity intensified, stray bolts shattering the ground. With a slight clench of her fist, Yoruichi gathered the surging lightning into her palm. It condensed, taking shape, forming a long sword of pure white lightning, piercing toward the sky. Her spiritual pressure poured out in waves, so dense it seemed almost tangible. On the opposite side, Masatsuki Ozaki still looked relaxed, but inwardly, he was alarmed. Damn, Yoruichi. With a display like this, are you trying to kill me? Not that she could hear his thoughts, and even if she could, she probably wouldn't care. She had already mastered this technique. Even if Masatsuki couldn't block it, she was confident she wouldn't cause him serious harm. With that assurance, the lightning sword in her grasp shone even brighter, illuminating the entire training ground. The sheer density of her spiritual pressure made the air thick and heavy, waves of heat rolling through the space. Accept your defeat, Masatsuki Ozaki. Yoruichi let out a wild laugh and swung the blade downward. The massive pillar of lightning rapidly expanded in Masatsuki's vision. His pupils contracted. It was clear, there was no way he could learn this technique right now. But that didn't mean he was just going to sit and take it. He hadn't mastered much of Shunko yet, but he was still a disciple of Genri Uzai. Planting his feet firmly, he took a balanced stance, one hand forming a palm in front, the other clenched at his waist. The lightning surrounding him vanished in an instant, replaced by rising heat, the air itself turning scorching. Ikatsu, Entei? Ikatsu, Flame Emperor. With a low shout, Masatsuki Ozaki threw his punch. The name was something he had just made up, but in reality, it was Ikatsu, combined with fire-based Shunko. White flames erupted from his right arm, while twin jets of fire blasted from his shoulders like rocket propulsion. Boom! Flame met lightning. The impact created a deafening shockwave, shaking the entire training hall as the ground itself groaned in protest. This. Yoruichi's eyes widened at the sight of his flame-like spiritual pressure. She immediately sensed something was off and instinctively reacted. In an instant, her lightning sword grew denser, its size and power surging. What the hell? Masatsuki Ozaki exclaimed as he felt the sword's strength increase, but he didn't back down. Boom. As expected, he was blasted away like a cannonball, crashing into a distant rock formation and shattering several boulders on impact. When the dust finally settled, Yoruichi reappeared before him. Lying on the ground, Masatsuki sighed and asked, "You lifted your spiritual pressure limit just now, didn't you?" It wasn't that he couldn't accept losing, but in that brief moment, he had definitely sensed Yoruichi's spiritual pressure spike to a level far beyond what a lieutenant should be capable of. Yoruichi remained silent for a beat before awkwardly sticking out her tongue. Seeing her reaction, Masatsuki Ozaki knew he was right. "This doesn't count. You broke the rules." "What? No way." Yoruichi protested, but after a brief pause, she quickly offered, "All right. How about we call it a draw? The wager still stands." Masatsuki gave her a long look. Then nodded slightly. Chapter 89, Yawa. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, a month had passed. Masatsuki Ozaki and Yoruichi Shioin had spent an unforgettable month together, pushing each other to their limits. Their spiritual bodies and spiritual pressure had been tempered like never before, and in the grand scheme of life, they had taken yet another step forward. It turned out that proper training could indeed enhance one's strength, but excessive training could also leave one feeling spiritually empty. Masatsuki Ozaki wasn't sure how Yoruichi was handling it, but he definitely felt a certain hollowness creeping in. After parting ways with her in the noble district, he moved into a lavish estate, a clear symbol of noble status. A gift from the Tsunayashiro clan. When they presented it, they had subtly hinted at keeping it under wraps. He didn't refuse. He simply accepted it without fuss. Thankfully, they had the good sense not to send any maids his way, otherwise, Rinjaku Matsumoto would have given him hell. Or perhaps they were just worried a servant might have loose lips and say something they shouldn't. In the courtyard, Rinjaku Matsumoto had been practicing her shikai for who knew how long. The sound of howling wind never ceased, it only grew louder, as if a storm was brewing. Masatsuki Ozaki lay back, eyes closed in feigned sleep, listening to the wind outside his window. He found it hard to believe, but the room was gradually quieting. Had Rinjaku finally cooled off? A lone figure knelt on the tatami mat, silently watching Masatsuki Ozaki. It was an unremarkable-looking middle-aged man with neatly trimmed black hair. His posture was impeccable, rigid yet effortless, dressed in a robe resembling a chiton from Greek mythology. His presence was serene, yet his gaze, those eyes, seemed to peer into the very fabric of fate itself, impossible to meet directly. Masatsuki Ozaki opened his eyes and froze. The man looked familiar, yet he couldn't recall where he had seen him before. With an almost divine gentleness, the man raised a hand, beckoning him forward with a soft, knowing smile. The golden light of dusk streamed in from behind him, casting an elongated shadow that stretched over Masatsuki Ozaki. Something about it made refusal impossible. He rose from his bed. At some point, a flowing robe had appeared over his shoulders, its material unfamiliar yet weightless. Step by step, he approached the man. And when he finally took his hand, the man stood, never loosening his grip, leading him toward the bedside. But what he saw next wasn't Rinjaku practicing with her Zanpakutō. Instead, before his very eyes, Soul Society unfolded in its entirety. Then the world of the living. And finally, even Hueco Mundo. Through a small, unassuming window, he could see all of the three realms. The man let go of his hand, placing his palm lightly on the windowsill, fingers tapping rhythmically against the wood. Masatsuki Ozaki remained at his side, puzzled, carefully studying him in the dimming glow of the setting sun. There was nothing particularly remarkable about him. Except for those eyes, subtly different, yet otherwise indistinguishable from any ordinary man among the countless beings of the three realms. Yet his presence carried an inexplicable divinity. Every movement radiated an air of sanctity, as if he had been born untouched by the dust of the world. He leaned against the windowsill, gazing into the distance. But in those eyes, those all-seeing eyes, there was something deeply human, a trace of loneliness. A stark contrast to his almost godlike presence. For a brief moment, Masatsuki Ozaki felt as if he, too, carried that same divine aura. But he knew better. He was no deity, detached from the world. He was nothing more than a man, a vulgar soul, hopelessly indulgent in the pleasures of life. So, my name is Masatsuki Ozaki. After some thought, Masatsuki Ozaki decided that it was best to greet this kind of person and show some friendliness. The sunset reflected in the man's eyes as he softly said, "My name is Yahweh." Masatsuki Ozaki thought he was joking. That name belonged to the god of Western religions, originally written as YHWH. The ancients gave their deity such a difficult name, supposedly to prevent mortals from speaking it directly. Over time, as the name was passed down, people misunderstood its pronunciation, and it became known as Jehovah. Suddenly, Masatsuki Ozaki thought of Hueco. The name Yahweh was strikingly similar to Hueco. However, after living in this world for so many years, he understood that they were not the same. And the man standing before him didn't resemble the Hueco he knew. "Masatsuki, what do you think of this world?" the man asked, turning to look at him. Masatsuki Ozaki nearly jumped in shock. The last time someone asked him that question, it was Sosuke Aizen, right in the middle of Sairai's streets. "Masatsuki, what do you think of this world?" A simple yet complex question. When Aizen asked, Masatsuki Ozaki had felt as though he was being tested. But when this man said the same words, the meaning was entirely different. It was as if he already knew Masatsuki didn't belong to this world, as if he was asking from the perspective of an observer. And he was genuinely looking forward to the answer. "Who the hell are you?" Masatsuki Ozaki's voice trembled slightly. For the first time, he felt like things had completely spiraled out of his control. "It doesn't matter. I simply sense that your connection to this world is growing stronger, that you are accepting it. So, I took this opportunity to come see you," the man who called himself Yahweh said. "It's an honor to meet you, noble outsider." "Don't be ridiculous, noble outsider. I'm just a minor noble, nothing grand, and what outsider? I don't know what you're talking about." Was this Aizen? Had he trapped me in Kyokusuagatsu? But how could he possibly know I was an outsider? I'm not some illusion created by anyone. I came to see you of my own free will. Yahweh seemed to see right through his thoughts and glanced out the window. The two stood by the window, like travelers on an unfamiliar road, strangers, yet willing to admire the scenery together. "And I sincerely want to hear your answer." "My answer?" Looking into his earnest eyes, Masatsuki Ozaki felt that perhaps he should say what he truly thought. "This is where I belong. I don't know about others, but to me, this world is interesting." "Just interesting?" "That's a concerning answer. But at least it's better than holding hostility toward the world." Yahweh stroked his chin and smirked. In the blink of an eye, he transformed into an ordinary middle-aged man. "Why would I be hostile toward the world? It hasn't done anything to me," Masatsuki Ozaki couldn't help but say. As if he had found the answer he was looking for, the middle-aged man burst into laughter, wiping tears from the corners of his eyes. "Kid, I'm starting to like you." Masatsuki Ozaki shuddered. Without thinking, he blurted out, "I don't like men." Yahweh froze for a second, then shook his head with a laugh. "Don't worry, neither do I." He took a step forward, and his body passed right through the wall. Before him stretched a massive, blazing sun, rising higher and higher. Wait. Is it just me, or is the sun getting closer? Masatsuki Ozaki was engulfed by the searing light. Chapter 90, Mission. He shot up in bed, drenched in sweat, as if he had just taken a sunbath inside the sun itself. Rinjaku Matsumoto stood before him, staring in shock before slowly sitting down at the edge of the bed. The room was empty except for the two of them. "Did you have a nightmare?" Rinjaku asked. "Or did you wear yourself out playing with your Uchiha for too long?" "I had a dream." "I'm not sure if it was a nightmare," Masatsuki Ozaki muttered, rubbing his eyes. "Is training over?" He stretched, feeling as if the world around him had become more attuned to him, more comfortable. If he had to describe it, it was a sense of belonging. It was as if, until now, he had been nothing more than a traveler in this world, but now, this world had started to feel like home. Though if he went by that man's words, it wasn't that the world had changed, it was that he was finally accepting it. It's almost dinner time. You promised to only train with your Zanpakutō for an hour every afternoon, Rinjaku huffed. And you've been sleeping all day. Are you part pig or something? No, I'm a snake. Masatsuki Ozaki blinked, startled. He had thought he'd only been asleep for a few hours, but he had actually slept for an entire day and night. Looks like he really needed to pace himself better. I didn't do anything weird, did I? No, you were out cold like a dead pig, Rinjaku said, shaking her head. If you didn't wake up soon, I was about to call Captain Anohana. Masatsuki Ozaki pressed a hand to his forehead. When exactly had that strange dream begun? Had it started the moment he lay down? When he first heard the wind? Or was he still dreaming? The feeling of not being able to distinguish reality from illusion was irritating. He reached out and smacked himself on the head, hard, then opened his eyes. And realized he wasn't wearing anything. Don't tell me that guy. Masatsuki narrowed his eyes, his gaze sharp as a blade, radiating pure murderous intent. It's not my fault. Rinjaku said weakly. You were just lying there, completely defenseless. Good thing it was you. Masatsuki exhaled in relief before making a face. No wonder his whole body felt sore, and he was still sweating. He must have just finished training. But that dream. It had felt way too real. He could still picture that middle-aged man's face with perfect clarity. Normally, he only had eyes for girls, so why was a middle-aged man lingering in his mind so vividly? Dinner's ready. Let's go. Oh, right. Masatsuki grabbed a random shirt and threw it on before following Rinjaku outside. Once outside, Rinjaku pulled out an ornate, gold-inlaid food box and began setting the dishes on the table, each one meticulously arranged. Let's see. She did a quick count, then pouted. 9 dishes in total. And they're all your favorites. She glanced at him. Don't give me that look. You know I can't cook. Ekamaru made them and sent them over. Masatsuki Ozaki nodded. Rinjaku was fine when it came to eating, but cooking? No way. These authentic Chinese dishes smelled incredible, one whiff and he could tell they'd been made with true skill. He really couldn't have picked a better little brother than Ekamaru. The guy could handle just about anything. Hold on a second. I've got something even better. Rinjaku Matsumoto walked into the kitchen. When she returned, she was carrying several bottles of sake. Well, for the record, Yaruichi and I didn't actually do anything. Masatsuki Ozaki swallowed hard. His head buzzed as he realized, she clearly wasn't going to let him off the hook that easily. Rinjaku picked up a bottle and raised an eyebrow. Not willing? Of course. I'm willing. Masatsuki pressed a hand to his forehead, his face pale as he thought to himself, am I going to end up like Sajun Kuichiki? Sitting at the dining table, Masatsuki looked like he had just suffered a great loss. What's with that face? Rinjaku, sitting beside him, wrapped an arm around him and puffed her cheeks in annoyance. It's nothing, nothing. Masatsuki forced a smile, only to suddenly realize that his body no longer ached, his back didn't hurt, and even his dizziness had disappeared. I'm not going anywhere tonight. I'll stay with you. Rinjaku brightened up instantly, nudging him with her shoulder over and over, clearly excited. As dinner began, they sat in the dim glow of flickering candlelight on the wooden chairs of the dining room. Actually, Yaruichi came looking for you today, Rinjaku said. You two didn't fight, did you? That was Masatsuki's biggest concern. What kind of people do you take us for? Rinjaku shot him a glare. If anyone deserves a beating, it's you, you troublemaker. Wait. Don't tell me you two. Masatsuki tensed, instinctively reaching for his waist. You had a mission today, but you didn't show up at the 2nd Division. That's why she came looking for you, Rinjaku explained. I told her what happened, and she said to let you rest. Late at night, in the 2nd Division's territory, the nest of maggots was brightly lit. Aside from Masatsuki Ozaki, who held the rank of 3rd seat, every member of the detention unit was present, a rare occurrence. The weather was raging. Torrential rain poured down, and howling winds swept through the area. The detention unit members stood motionless under the storm, their figures rigid against the relentless wind and rain. In the uneasy darkness of the surrounding forest, only the flickering glow of Kido spells provided illumination. Standing amidst the downpour, Yaruichi Shioin, captain of the 2nd Division, gave a nod to the guard stationed at the nest of maggots. From behind, a man's angry shouts rang out. Yaruichi frowned. I'll personally escort Takasugi Hirofumi inside. Is the solitary cell ready? It's ready. Open the gate, Ekamaru called out from his post at the dungeon entrance. Takasugi Hirofumi might not have been the most dangerous criminal in the nest of maggots, but he was certainly the most powerful one ever confined there. Leaving him in the same unrestricted conditions as the other high-risk inmates was too dangerous. He had to be placed in solitary confinement under strict supervision. As the heavy doors creaked open, Yaruichi led Takasugi Hirofumi inside, securing his hands, feet, and neck with specially reinforced restraints. "You can't do this to me. You know who I am?" Takasugi roared. "Quit shouting." "Of course, I know who you are." Yoruichi smirked. "But the fact that you're locked up here should tell you everything. They've already abandoned you, haven't they?" "You don't understand at all," Takasugi sneered. "With that fool Rentaro dead, they can't afford to abandon me. The Tsunayashiro clan's branch family never had many captain-level powerhouses to begin with. Aside from one branch member under house arrest and a few well-placed pawns within the 13th Division of Imperial Guards, he was the only captain-class Shinigami left in the Tsunayashiro branch family. His value to them was undeniable. There was no way they would simply cast him aside. As far as he was concerned, his imprisonment here was the result of political maneuvering by rival noble houses, not the will of the Tsunayashiro clan itself. After all, the Central 46 had chosen to spare his life. That alone was proof enough. "Humphrey. Looks like you know quite a bit." Yoruichi crossed her arms. "If you're willing to share even more useful information, I might consider improving your treatment." She leaned in slightly. "It's been a while since you've had to suffer like this, hasn't it?" For a moment, Takasugi seemed tempted. But then, his expression hardened. He closed his eyes and fell silent. Clearly, what he feared most was losing his life. Chapter 91, Senkaimon. The next morning, at the 12th Division Barracks. "Here's what you asked for," Kusagakure said, handing Masatsuki Ozaki a protective suit and an accessory. "Got it. Then give this to Kiryu-san." Masatsuki Ozaki extended his hand, offering a lunchbox. "Today's special recipe." Kusagakure took the lunchbox, weighing it in his hands to check its contents. "Is your cooking really that good? Good enough to have a captain completely hooked?" Kusuk had to admit, though his friend wasn't as intelligent as he was he had unexpected talents in many areas. Cooking, for instance, was something Kusuk couldn't compete with at all. After tasting his food once, Kiryu Hikaifun had arranged, through the channels of the Hurahara shop, for him to provide a takeout service. When Masatsuki Ozaki was training in Shunko and disappeared for a month, Kiryu Hikaifun was practically losing her appetite. The temptation was terrifying. "Of course. Haven't you noticed how plump and healthy Renjaku and Jin have gotten?" Masatsuki Ozaki lowered his voice. "If you want to sneak a bite, I'll pretend I didn't see anything." "No need. Captain Hikaifun is extremely sensitive to numbers and weight, she'd know if even a single portion was missing." Kusagakure shuddered, as if recalling an unpleasant memory. Then, shifting the topic, he said, "Let me tell you about the gift you're giving. The protective suit is a good choice. Kakaku can wear it while experimenting. As for the choker, see that metal ornament in the center? Pull it out, and it turns into a chain sword. But since you insisted on this design, how you present it is up to you." Masatsuki Ozaki examined the necklace in his hands. It looked more like a choker, with a rhombus-shaped silver metal piece at the center, its hollowed-out section suspending a teardrop-shaped clear crystal. He had no idea how such a small accessory could conceal an entire chain sword, but considering that Mayuri Kirotsuchi could hide a scythe in his ear, he decided not to dwell on it. Tucking the items away, Masatsuki Ozaki asked, "Kusuk, can you make a Senkaimon?" Kusagakure scoffed. No. He already knew Masatsuki Ozaki had become a noble and was now looking for a personal Senkaimon. But no meant no, he wasn't about to lie about it. "Can the Shinigami Research and Development Institute make one?" Masatsuki Ozaki frowned. He hadn't expected it to be this difficult to obtain a Senkaimon. He had searched all over the noble district this morning and still couldn't find a place that could make or sell one, which was why he had came to Kusuk for help. Yet even Kusuk, a noble himself, had no way of making one. It seemed these things were quite rare. "As far as I know, the Shinigami Research and Development Institute doesn't have any information on that for now. You might want to ask Captain Hikaifun, she might know how to make one," Kusuk suggested, glancing off into the distance. Masatsuki Ozaki turned to look. A beautiful woman with purple hair was approaching. "Masatsuki, I'd love to help you, but I'm sorry, I don't know how to make a Senkaimon either," Kiryu Hikaifun said, scratching her head. Masatsuki Ozaki rubbed his chin. "I see." Kiryu Hikaifun sighed. "It's an extremely ancient technique, older than the 13th Division of Imperial Guards itself. Right now, only the oldest noble clans still retain this knowledge. If you really need one, you might want to ask Captain Shioin for help. The Shioin clan, being one of the most ancient noble families in Seoul society, should have the technology to create a Senkaimon." Masatsuki Ozaki nodded. "I get it now. I've just escaped the tiger's den, only to step into the lion's den. Thank you very much, Kiryu-san." "No need to thank me. Garyohikaifun waved a hand dismissively. If you really want to show your appreciation, let's have a cooking exchange sometime. I've almost mastered the dishes you taught me last time, but I still struggle with controlling the heat. Of course, I'll definitely drop by when I have time, Masatsuki Ozaki chuckled. With Garyohikaifun taking the initiative, there was no way he'd refuse. That afternoon, in the 2nd Division captain's office. You either don't show up for work and sleep at home, or you come straight to me asking for favors. You're enjoying being third seat way more than I enjoy being captain, Yaruichi Shioing huffed, crossing her arms. Her expression and movements had an undeniable charm to them. And whose fault do you think that is? Being third seat is way too tough, work all day and still get bossed around by my superior. Masatsuki Ozaki sighed dramatically. Ugh, just talking about it is embarrassing. Let's not even go there. Yoruichi's face flushed slightly, knowing full well that he was talking about her. Seeing her irritation fade, Masatsuki Ozaki grinned. Actually, I didn't just come here to ask for help, I brought you a gift. A gift? Masatsuki Ozaki pulled out the accessory Kusagakure Hera had given him. Here, take a look. You actually put some thought into this. Yoruichi's face lit up with a smile. She didn't sense anything unusual about it, instead, she was just pleased that Masatsuki knew her tastes. She had worn plenty of chokers like this before, she was even wearing a bow-shaped one at that very moment. Masatsuki Ozaki took a seat beside her and personally fastened the necklace around her neck. I had Gisu custom make it. I designed a look myself. Pull the ornament at the front, and it triggers a mechanism that turns it into a chain sword. So? Do you like it? Not bad. I like it. Yaruichi tilted her head back slightly, like a proud swan. Since you've given your captain such a valuable gift, I can't be rude either. Leave the Senkaimon to me. That doesn't seem right. Masatsuki hesitated. What's wrong with it? As the head of the Shioing clan, do you really think I'd be stingy about something like a Senkaimon? Yoruichi waved a hand grandly. Just sit back and wait. Alright then. Masatsuki Ozaki seemed conflicted but eventually muttered in agreement. The Fullbringers better be prepared. Time to clean up the Soul King fragments. I wonder how Aizen's investigation is going. He's been in the world of the living for so long now. Masatsuki glanced up at Yoruichi, who was standing in front of the mirror, admiring the necklace around her neck. His eyes suddenly gleamed with an idea. He walked up beside her, leaned in close, and whispered something in her ear. Are you out of your mind? Yoruichi's eyes widened in shock. Don't forget, you still owe me 2 favors. Or are you saying that the great captain of the 2nd Division, head of the Shioing clan, Lady Yoruichi, doesn't keep her word? Masatsuki Ozaki shook his head in disappointment. If you can't do it, then I've got nothing more to say. But I guess Yoruichi-sama's promises don't mean much after all. TCH. You really have some nerve saying that. Yoruichi gritted her teeth, then locked the doors and windows of her office. She took a seat, her body gradually shrinking. In mere moments, only a pile of clothes remained where she had been. What are you waiting for, you idiot? A sleek black cat crawled out from the garments. Before she could finish speaking, Masatsuki Ozaki had already transformed into a large black and white cat and pounced. The 2 feline shadows intertwined, and soon, strange cat-like sounds echoed through the office. Chapter 92, Brother-in-law is not here. After the 2 of them stepped into a new world, Masatsuki Ozaki took a moment to rest, shifting back into his human form before dressing and leaving the 2nd Division. As the 3rd seat, he could come and go from the barracks freely without anyone stopping him. However, to maintain the dignified image of a responsible officer, he decided it wouldn't be wise to let his subordinates catch him slacking off. Instead, he chose the more discreet route, scaling the walls and heading straight for West Rukongai. A light drizzle fell. After weaving through a dense cluster of grand mansions, Shingitsune Yashiro finally caught sight of the towering council chamber. Pushing open the doors, he stepped inside to find that the elders had been waiting for quite some time. What's going on? Why has Takasugi Hirofumi been imprisoned in the nest of maggots? His voice was sharp with accusation. Tamabe Tsunayashiro's lips curled slightly in a mocking smile. Your Excellency Shingu, this is the Tsunayashiro clan's elder council. Is there a need for such outbursts? Don't forget your position, you're an elder yourself, representing the dignity of this family. Shingu Tsunayashiro's expression darkened. He had no retort to Tamabe's ridicule, knowing that the latter's influence within the main family far exceeded his own. His power primarily lay within the branch families, and despite his frustration, Tamabe's words weren't wrong. He had no valid counter-argument. But Takasugi Hirofumi has a third-class spiritual pressure, and the nest of maggots is under the jurisdiction of the Shioing clan. Shingu Tsunayashiro took his seat among the elders, his voice heavy. Tamabe Tsunayashiro cast him a glance before Takayasu Tsunayashiro raised a hand, prompting a subtle shift in the elder's expressions. Your Excellency Shingu, it's not that we don't want to save Takasugi Hirofumi, it's that we simply can't. Yes, the Tsunayashiro clan is the most powerful noble house at present, but if the Kuachiki and Shioin clans join forces, even we would struggle to hold our ground. I suggest you recognize the reality of the situation. The Tsunayashiro clan is not omnipotent. If we were, there would be no need for the rebels to exist, don't you agree? The elders nodded in agreement. The purpose of the rebel faction was to weaken rival noble houses and expand the Tsunayashiro clan's influence. If they truly had absolute control, there'd be no need for such tactics, they could simply command their enemies to submit or disband outright. So we're just going to let Takasugi Hirofumi die in the nest of maggots? Shingu Tsunayashiro clenched his fists, his voice laced with cold laughter. The Central 46 sentenced him to imprisonment, not execution. A 3,000-year sentence might as well be a death sentence. And with Masatsuki Ozaki overseeing the nest of maggots now, who knows how long he'll last? That's not for us to decide. Takayasu Tsunayashiro waved a hand dismissively. We did everything we could to preserve his life, and even our family's reputation has taken a hit because of it. He narrowed his eyes. Perhaps the branch families should start looking for other solutions. Takayasu knew full well that while Shingu Tsunayashiro had some intelligence, it wasn't quite enough. That was precisely why the branch families had chosen him as their representative. Someone too clever would be difficult to control, while someone too foolish wouldn't be able to rise to an elder's position even with support. The best candidate was someone with just enough cunning, but not too much. Shingu Tsunayashiro's expression remained cold as he reluctantly nodded. As he sat there, listening with his eyes closed, the sound of rain outside the window seemed to grow heavier, pounding down with increasing intensity. Meanwhile, thanks to his exceptional flash steps skills, Masatsuki Ozaki easily slipped out of Siriite AI. He greeted the Hikatoman gatekeeper, Jidenbu Kanzaka, before once again stepping onto the soil of Jinrenon, the first district of Rukongai. Upon reaching the outskirts of the Shiba residence, Masatsuki Ozaki carefully concealed himself at a distance, peering toward the main gate. Two towering, muscle-bound men stood guard, but the one person who viewed him as a sworn enemy was nowhere to be seen. Kogane Hiko and Shiragan Hiko, is your Aniki not home? Masatsuki-sama. The two burly men looked slightly surprised before answering, yes, the head of the household is not at home. They were the Shiba family's servants and had also been Kakaku and Keiin's teachers, raising them since childhood. One look at their sturdy physiques made it clear they were both masters of hand-to-hand combat. Is Kakaku home? Lady Kakaku is in the tea room. Hearing the answer he wanted, Masatsuki Ozaki crossed his arms and strode inside. If his elder brother-in-law wasn't around, then wasn't Kakaku in charge of the household? Considering their relationship, he could be considered half the master of this house. Declining Kogane Hiko's offer to accompany him, Masatsuki Ozaki entered alone. He made his way down the stairs, through a long corridor, and stopped in front of a paper door. Kogane Hiko? Do we have a guest? Perhaps hearing movement, a voice laced with amusement came from inside. Masatsuki Ozaki didn't answer and instead asked, do I count as a guest? A flicker of joy flashed in Kakaku Shiba's eyes. Masatsuki, come in. At those words, Masatsuki Ozaki pushed the door open and stepped inside. What brings you here? Did Yoruichi actually let you come back? Kakaku Shiba teased. What kind of question is that? You make it sound like Yoruichi has me under house arrest, Masatsuki Ozaki scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. She probably would if she could. Kakaku Shiba smirked. She knew her childhood friend too well. Coming to her in the middle of the night to ask about some strange secret technique, it was obviously for the man standing before her. Too bad for Yoruichi, though. The Shiba family had passed down plenty of techniques, but none that could alter one's body shape. What did Yoruichi take her for? Everything about her was 100% natural. Her figure wasn't the result of any modifications, it was pure natural talent. Thinking of this, Kakaku Shiba rolled her eyes. Seriously, why did Yoruichi think she had some secret art to change her body? If she had time to chase after that nonsense, she might as well put more effort into studying the cat transformation jutsu. If turning into a cat was possible, then refining it further to alter a spirit body shouldn't be too far off. Let's not talk about Yoruichi for now. I came to give you this. Masatsuki Ozaki pulled out a set of clothing. Protective gear? Kakaku Shiba asked. Masatsuki Ozaki nodded. This is ugly. Kakaku Shiba spread out the outfit with a look of distaste. The entire suit was black from head to toe, including the mask, shoes, and gloves. It somewhat resembled the 2nd Division's stealth uniforms but was bulkier, making it even less appealing. Masatsuki Ozaki sighed. Who cares about looks? You're wearing it for experiments, not a fashion show. Thinking about Kukaku's future and the arm she would eventually lose, Masatsuki still found her beautiful, but he didn't want things to turn out that way. So he gave a firm reminder. Make sure you wear this during experiments. Got it? Yes, yes. Kukaku Shiba waved a hand lazily, brushing off the concern. Still, seeing how seriously Masatsuki was worrying over her brought a smile to her lips. How should I thank you for such a thoughtful gift? She suddenly grabbed Masatsuki Ozaki's collar, leaned in, and took a deep breath against his neck. You smell like Yoruichi. You can tell from that? Masatsuki Ozaki was stunned. They had been in cat form at the time, how could she still pick up the scent? He was about to come up with an excuse but hesitated. Well. Kukaku didn't wait for him to finish. Before he could say another word, she had already pinned him down, eyes burning with emotion. Chapter 93, Little Trick. Early the next morning, Masatsuki Ozaki woke up shortly after sunrise. His mind was clear, and despite only getting a few hours of sleep, he didn't feel tired at all. Ha! Kukaku Shiba let out a big yawn, groggily scratching her head. Her hair was a tangled mess, sticky and clumped together. Tugging at it hurt, so she simply gave up dealing with it. Masatsuki Ozaki, amused, gently poked her cheek with a fond expression. Hey, wake up already. Are you planning to sleep until nightfall again? MMGH. What's it matter? I'm the head of the family. Kukaku Shiba let out a rare, spoiled-sounding mumble as she snuggled closer to him in protest. It was undeniably cute, but the two of them had long since moved past the stage where every little action sent their hearts racing. With saint-like willpower, Masatsuki Ozaki resisted her charms. Still, he figured teasing her a little wouldn't hurt. After all, it wasn't every day he got to see this usually fearless and strong-willed woman acting so adorably. Smirking, he pinched the soft flesh of her cheek while his other hand slipped under the covers. You're pushing it, you know. Kukaku's eyes snapped open, and she let out a startled yelp. It took her a few seconds to shake off the haze of sleep, but once she realized this smug man was treating her like a toy, her pretty face immediately twisted into an intimidating scowl. Then, without hesitation, she pinched his waist hard and clicked her tongue in annoyance. TCH. Hurry up and help me take a bath. Yes, yes. Just toss me aside the moment you've had your fun, huh? Masatsuki Ozaki let out a hopeless chuckle, scooped her up in his arms, threw on a robe, and carried her toward the bath. As he stepped into the warm water with her still in his arms, he flashed a mischievous grin. If the souls in West Rukongai knew their Aizen had a man, I wonder what kind of faces they'd make. Kukaku shot him a disgusted look. At your age, you're already making the same sleazy old man expressions as Ishin? Who the hell did you learn that from? She gave him 2 half-hearted punches before giving up on resisting altogether. In Soul Society, 200 or 300 years old was still considered young, let alone Masatsuki, who was only in his early 20s. Resting her chin in her palm, she sighed. How the hell had she fallen for this guy? She thought back. When they first met, this guy had approached the Shiba family under the guise of a business deal. At the time, Keion was too focused on training and gathering subordinates to handle family affairs, leaving the household struggling financially. So, she agreed to Masatsuki's proposal without much hesitation. Sure enough, after that, the Shiba family's wealth steadily grew. And then, at some point, this kid started showing up every few days to see her. Back then, he wasn't exactly innocent, but when it came to relationships, he was definitely clueless. It was obvious to everyone what he was after, herself included. Still, he was easy on the eyes, and more importantly, he was fun to be around. So, she humored him. As time went on, Masatsuki Ozaki somehow became more and more her type. And, well, one thing led to another. But thinking about it now, how did that awkward little brat, who used to hide in her arms, turn into this smug bastard? If it weren't for this fateful entanglement with him, she might have never ended up with a man in her entire life. She could have just spent her days perfecting fireworks, free from all these distractions. This damn guy. It was all his fault. Kukaku Shiba frowned, looking both annoyed and exasperated. Give me back my life, you brat. Alright, then I'll compensate you with mine, Masatsuki Ozaki said, spreading his arms before pulling her into a tight embrace. At this rate, he was probably going to miss work at the 2nd Division again. Holding Kukaku close, Masatsuki gazed at her hazy, half-lidded eyes before something suddenly came to mind. Speaking of which, where's my brother-in-law? Why would you bring him up now of all times? Kukaku glared at him, clearly irritated. I think he went to apply to the Shino Academy. Already fully immersed in the moment, she shot him a sharp look, as if blaming him for ruining the mood. First it was Uncle Ishin, and now my brother. Are you planning to drag my whole family into trouble? What's he going to the Shino Academy for? Is he coming after me? Masatsuki mused before kissing her cheek in an apologetic gesture. Uncle Ishin joining the 13th Division of Imperial Guards was definitely my fault, I admit that. But I had nothing to do with your brother applying to the Shino Academy. You easily took him down last time. Maybe he couldn't accept it and decided to join the 13th Division of Imperial Guards to get stronger, Kukaku muttered through gritted teeth, barely holding back a sound. With his talent, getting into the Shino Academy should be a breeze, Masatsuki noted, glancing at Kukaku as his hand continued moving beneath the water. She let out a muffled gasp. Even though the Shiba family had fallen from grace, they still carried the bloodline of one of the 5 great noble clans, granting them naturally powerful spiritual pressure. Take Kukaku, for example. She had spent her entire life obsessed with fireworks while also managing the family, barely dedicating any time to actual spiritual pressure training. Yet, her spiritual pressure had still reached a level of a seated officer. That was the power of bloodline inheritance. It made Masatsuki wonder, just what kind of people were the ancestors of the 5 great noble clans? Even after so many generations, their descendants still carried exceptional talent that far surpassed ordinary souls. But lingering on unrelated thoughts now would just kill the mood. So instead, he focused on enjoying the moment, just as Kukaku wanted. She let out another soft hum before responding eagerly. A full day and night passed as they indulged in each other's company. In the bedroom, Masatsuki Ozaki exhaled deeply. Kukaku was still resting in his arms, her long black hair spilling over her shoulders, her fair face flushed and alluring. He placed a gentle kiss on her forehead, carefully pulled the blanket over her, and then got up to prepare for departure. After dressing, he walked to the head of the bed and pressed a hidden mechanism on the wall. A moment later, a concealed compartment slid open, revealing a wooden box inside. Masatsuki formed a complex hand seal, activating the Kido technique Kukaku had taught him. The box unlocked automatically, revealing a scroll inside. This was the training method for Getsuga Tensho. It had taken him an entire day and night to convince Kukaku to let him learn it. As he flipped through the scroll, his mind drifted back to the sword pressure technique he had studied under Old Man Yamamoto. Getsuga Tensho felt like an advanced variation of sword pressure. Standard sword pressure involved releasing spiritual pressure through a Zanpakutō. But Getsuga Tensho took it a step further, it required compressing the spiritual pressure before unleashing the slash. This made it an excellent test of a Shinigami's control over their spiritual energy. But for Masatsuki, it wasn't anything groundbreaking. Just another small technique. He thought casually. And that was exactly what it was to him, a minor skill. He didn't even bother taking the scroll with him. After reading through it twice, he had already memorized every detail. Chapter 94, Cooking. After leaving behind a letter for Kukaku, who looked especially cute while sleeping, Masatsuki Ozaki left the Shiba residence. The 13th Division of Imperial Guards was quite far from West Rukongai. Fortunately, Masatsuki Ozaki wasn't in a hurry. Taking his time, he found a small restaurant, had a leisurely breakfast, and rested for a while before heading toward the 12th Division under the scorching sun. For the past 2 days, Garyo Hikaifun had been using Kido to send him requests for takeout again. He had been busy at the time and turned her down, saying he didn't have time. Instead, he arranged to teach her how to cook today. By now, it was close to noon, and the streets were still bustling with Shinigami moving quickly. Masatsuki figured they were most likely hurrying to the squad cafeteria while they still had some free time. It reminded him of his past life. Back in high school, his favorite class had been gym. He still remembered how physical education was always the last period before lunch. If he was lucky, and the teacher wasn't out sick, he could run to the cafeteria early and avoid competing with other students in the mad dash for food. Funny how I ended up in a place where life and death are unpredictable, yet my days somehow feel more relaxed. Masatsuki Ozaki chuckled to himself as he happened to pass by the 8th Division barracks. The sight reminded him of an old friend. He had first met this friend on the day he enrolled at the Shino Academy, and they had since been caught up in a business venture that would definitely be considered illegal in modern society. Soon enough, that very friend appeared in front of the 8th Division barracks, holding a peculiar-looking book. The faintly visible title reads Suichugetsu, Masatsuki Ozaki's pen name. The person holding it was none other than Lisa Yadomaru, lieutenant of the 8th Division. Lisa glanced up at him, her eyes filled with expectation. Beside her stood a young girl with glasses. Following Lisa's gaze, the little girl looked at Masatsuki, her large eyes brimming with curiosity. Masatsuki Ozaki cast a brief glance at the girl before shaking his head slightly at Lisa. Lisa's face fell in disappointment as she turned back and walked into the 8th Division quarters. I feel like I've seen that kid somewhere before. Next time, I'll ask Lisa about her. Shaking off his curiosity, Masatsuki continued on his way. After days of rain, Sairei was finally blessed with a bright and sunny day. At some point, the number of people on the streets had dwindled significantly. With a light step, Masatsuki Ozaki arrived at the entrance of the 12th Division barracks and informed the station Shinigami of his arrival. The guard seemed to have been expecting him and wordlessly opened the door, allowing him to enter. Masatsuki strolled down the clean, orderly corridor, heading straight for the captain's quarters. That was his destination, or more precisely, where Kiryu Hikaifun lived. Stopping in front of a paper door, he raised his hand and knocked gently. "Kiryu-san." "Come in," came a muffled voice from inside the room. Masatsuki Ozaki slid open the paper door. Inside, Kiryu Hikaifun was sitting cross-legged on the floor, chewing on something, a book resting on her lap. Beside her were tea and snacks. Just from the cover, Masatsuki could tell she was nothing like Lisa Yadomaru, whose mind was filled with all sorts of bizarre material. Kiryu was a true food enthusiast, the kind who could start salivating just from reading about recipes. Noticing his gaze, she gave a sheepish smile. Food in Seoul's society was scarce. The nobles undoubtedly lived the best lives here, but their so-called luxurious meals, while intricately prepared, weren't as grand as they seemed. Sure, there were delicious dishes, but the variety was limited. No matter how good something was, eating the same things over and over again eventually got dull. Kiryu picked up the book, which was essentially a cookbook, and handed it to Masatsuki. "Masatsuki, look, don't these dishes seem pretty good? I managed to get this from some top chefs in the noble district." She suddenly clapped her hands. "Speaking of which, you're a noble now, right? You must have had these kinds of meals before. Let me take a look." Masatsuki took the book. The recipes were all traditional Japanese cuisine, not much different from what existed in the world of the living. At this point in history, Japan had only just begun interacting with the outside world. It was nothing like the advanced nation it would become in the future, and its culinary variety was still quite limited. Most of the dishes in the book focused on bringing out the natural flavors of the ingredients, favoring lighter seasoning. However, the people of Sairei, Masatsuki included, generally preferred bolder flavors. While the dishes in the book were visually appealing and required complex preparation, they didn't necessarily guarantee great taste. Kiryu might think these recipes were amazing, but to Masatsuki, who had never skimped on good food and had learned various cooking styles, they were completely unremarkable. They looked nice, but the flavors seemed too mild. "Not my thing," Masatsuki said matter-of-factly. "If you really want to try noble cuisine, I could cook some for you." Despite his words, he made no move to do so. He knew Kiryu had a similar taste to his, she liked her food rich and flavorful. "Forget it, then." Kiryu waved a hand dismissively, instantly losing interest in the book. Masatsuki thought for a moment. "How about I teach you how to make fried food today? It's easy to prepare and suits your taste better." Fried food was high in calories and could easily lead to weight gain. Masatsuki himself had the kind of metabolism that made it hard to put on weight, but he knew Kiryu had the potential to gain some. Not that it really mattered, she could always burn it off by using up her spiritual pressure. Besides, it wasn't like he was about to deny her the joy of eating just because she might gain a little weight. If he tried, she'd probably cut ties with him on the spot. And since she could slim down whenever she wanted, it wasn't an issue at all. Without waiting for her response, Masatsuki moved around the room and opened another door. Inside was a fully equipped kitchen. Kiryu's love for food had driven her to convert part of her captain's quarters into a dedicated cooking space. This wasn't Masatsuki's first time here. He effortlessly opened the cabinets and pulled out various ingredients. Kiryu, having completely abandoned any captain-like dignity, followed him around like an eager apprentice. Seeing how serious he looked, she even took out a notebook and started jotting down notes. Standing at the counter, Masatsuki couldn't help but marvel at the setup, even though he had seen it before. Her kitchen was better stocked than his own. For this era, it had an impressive collection of cooking tools, rivaling anything in Seoul's society. Under Kiryu's attentive gaze, Masatsuki began cooking with practiced ease. With her watching, he felt even more motivated. Of course, he hadn't come here just to cook. His real reason was the charming woman standing right behind him. There was an old saying, if you want to win someone's heart, start with their stomach. Masatsuki didn't know if that worked on everyone. But after spending so much time with Kiryu, he was certain it worked on her. Chapter 95, Little Sister Kiryu Hikaifun ate heartily, her chest rising and falling with each bite. Meanwhile, Masatsuki Ozaki sipped his tea, pretending not to notice the captivating scene before him. At this point, his interest in the food had completely vanished. He couldn't help it, the sight of a beautiful woman enjoying a meal so enthusiastically had stolen his attention. At first, under his gaze, Kiryu maintained a refined demeanor. But as time went on, her chewing sped up, and soon, she was devouring the food without restraint. Masatsuki Ozaki watched with amusement, a smile playing on his lips as he considered what to teach her next time. Fried foods were easy to make, but they also became tiring to eat quickly. Well, that was part of the plan. Knowing Girio's appetite, he had intentionally prepared enough food for 5 people. Yet in just over 10 minutes, she had polished off everything on her own. Wiping her glossy, well-fed lips, Girio patted her still flat stomach, signaling that it was time to get down to business. The real reason she had invited Masatsuki over wasn't just to eat, it was to learn how to cook. She returned to the kitchen, with Masatsuki following closely behind, giving her a hands-on, one-on-one lesson. By the time the sun began to set, both of them had achieved their goals, parting ways fully satisfied. Masatsuki Ozaki left the 12th Division and returned to his mansion in Noble Street, where he and Ranger Matsumoto delved into the profound academic discussion of creating little Shinigami. The next morning, Masatsuki and Jinikamaru went to the 2nd Division cafeteria for breakfast. Though Masatsuki was a noble, the 2nd Division was managed by both the highest-ranking and wealthiest noble clans. The food served here was no worse than what noble chefs could prepare. Neither of them had any complaints about the cafeteria. When they were too lazy to cook, this was the best option. After breakfast, Masatsuki left all the work to Jin and headed toward the nest of maggots. He was planning to meet its newest resident. If the newcomer was suitable, he might even recruit them to help with his training. However, just as he stepped out of the 2nd Division barracks, a loud voice called out behind him. "Masatsuki-san, please wait." Masatsuki raised an eyebrow. "If it's about work, just go to Jin. Why are they looking for me?" The voice was familiar, so he turned to see a broad-shouldered, stocky man with a brown pompadour, a thick gold chain around his neck, and an unmistakable presence. An old acquaintance, Marino Shinomida. "What's up?" Masatsuki asked, puzzled. As the lieutenant of the 2nd Division, Omega rarely sought him out unless it was to pass down official orders. After spending so much time here, Masatsuki had long established that all of his duties were Jin's responsibility. "The captain wants to see you," Omega said. Masatsuki frowned in suspicion. "Yoruichi wants to see me? What for? Is she trying to drag me into another game of cat versus dragon again?" Led by Omega, Masatsuki arrived at the captain's office. After announcing his arrival and receiving permission to enter, Omega bowed and took his leave. Masatsuki slid open the door and immediately spotted Yoruichi Shioing lounging comfortably on a seat that resembled a legless sofa. Her small, delicate feet were bare, carelessly resting on a soft cushion in a way that was undeniably enticing. Masatsuki hesitated, battling with himself internally, before reluctantly tearing his gaze away. However, Yoruichi, as if sensing his thoughts, deliberately stretched her body. Her smooth, petite feet curled slightly, her toes flexing like the sculpted details of a masterwork. It was almost as if they were inviting him to reach out and admire them up close. Masatsuki nearly stepped forward, ready to offer his captain a foot massage. That was when he noticed someone else standing beside her. The figure was small and slender, with short black hair and dressed in a black Hanmitsukido combat uniform. A cute, petite girl. From her rosy cheeks and the slightly nervous look on her face, Masatsuki could tell she was shy. However, what surprised him was that her flustered expression wasn't directed at him, it was because of Yoruichi. Wait. Is this a love rival? Masatsuki's eyes widened in alarm. Masatsuki, this is Shelling Feng, from the Feng family. Starting today, she will officially serve as my personal guard, code name Sui Feng, Yoruichi Shioin said. Feng, this is Masatsuki Ozaki, 3rd seat. Introduce yourself. Yes, Yoruichi-sama. Sui Feng bowed and said to Ozaki Masatsuki, it's a pleasure to meet you, Ozaki 3rd seat. I look forward to working with you. She's surprisingly formal. Masatsuki Ozaki raised an eyebrow, immediately understanding what Yoruichi meant. Sui Feng must be the girl she had once described as her favorite type, the future captain of the 2nd Division. At this moment, she still looked young, her features carrying the innocence of a girl who had yet to mature. But beneath that, traces of her future self could already be seen. Masatsuki estimated she couldn't be older than 50. To be personally assigned as a bodyguard to the commander-in-chief at this age was already an impressive achievement. Still, Masatsuki wasn't foolish enough to ask Yoruichi if this meeting was simply to fulfill some past promise. After all, no one would be happy about being presented as a gift. Even if that gift was just a simple introduction. Likewise, Masatsuki responded seriously before turning to Yoruichi. So, did you call me here just to show off your new, capable subordinate? Hearing Masatsuki's disrespectful tone, Sui Feng instinctively straightened, ready to reprimand him, but Yoruichi casually waved her hand, stopping her. Of course not. Suifeng is now part of my personal guard, and today is her first day with the 2nd Division, Yaruichi explained. So, I'm asking you to show her around. No objections, right? Masatsuki was a bit surprised. Making a rookie who had just joined the Onmitsukido a personal guard seemed bold. Still, he led Suifeng out of the office and turned to ask, Feng, where do you want to go first? Suifeng didn't answer right away. Instead, she glanced back at the paper door behind her. Is Yoruichi really that charming? Masatsuki wondered, then suddenly remembered, wasn't he the one who had spent a whole month entangled with Yoruichi in the underground training hall? You want to stay in the captain's office? Suifeng shook her head. I want to stay by Lady Yoruichi's side, but I will follow her orders and take the tour. You really like Yoruichi, huh? Masatsuki remarked. Suifeng's face immediately turned red. That's not it. I just come from the Feng family. Our lineage has always taken pride in serving and protecting the Shioin clan. I have no right to like Lady Yoruichi. Just being able to stay by her side is enough. Masatsuki was at a loss for words. For a moment, he couldn't tell whether this girl was just stubborn, easily embarrassed, or simply too bold. Was she denying it or confessing? It was hard to tell. The passing squad members seemed to have overheard their conversation, casting Suifeng some rather curious glances. Noticing the attention, Suifeng immediately shrank back, lowering her head. Did I embarrass Lady Yoruichi? Masatsuki covered his face. Is this what they call being love-struck? You should be worrying about yourself, little sister. Chapter 96, Witnessing Strength. Masatsuki Ozaki led Suifeng away from the gathering crowd, distancing themselves from any unnecessary trouble. As they walked, he rubbed his chin. Shelling Feng, can I just call you Suifeng from now on? He had always referred to her as Suifeng in his previous life, and changing how he addressed her so suddenly felt a bit unnatural. Shelling Feng was briefly taken aback before nodding. Of course. The code name Suifeng originally belonged to her grandmother, and she had inherited it upon joining the Onmitsukido. As a lower noble family, the Feng clan had a long history of serving as executioners and assassins. Anyone who failed to join the executive militia was exiled. Because of this, members of the Feng family underwent Onmitsukido training from an early age. For someone like Shelling Feng, who had grown up under strict family training, using code names was second nature. So when Masatsuki made his request, she didn't think much of it. Masatsuki nodded. Suifeng, let's skip the office area for now. Next up are the training grounds and the nest of maggots. Where do you want to go first? Where to go? I heard that Ozaki 3rd Seat and Lady Yoruichi are quite close. Is that true? Rather than answering, Suifeng posed a question of her own. Masatsuki immediately sensed hostility, but he remained composed and openly admitted, that's right. Suifeng stopped in her tracks. I want to go to the training grounds, seeing Ozaki 3rd Seat's strength would be even better. Masatsuki was momentarily stunned but quickly understood. So, she sees me as a romantic rival and wants to test me. If it were anyone else, he would have beaten them into submission and left them in the dirt without a second thought. But since it was Suifeng, he was willing to show a little more patience. Leading the young girl, Masatsuki stepped into the training grounds. Wait here for a moment. With that, he walked over to the Shinigami guarding the area. The guard seemed a little surprised to see him but said nothing, simply leading the two of them to one of the best training grounds in the 2nd Division. A wooden sign with the character 3 hung at the entrance. This was the exclusive training ground for the 3rd Seat of the 2nd Division. Masatsuki had always treated the nest of maggots as his personal training space, so he had never actually been here before, hence why he needed guidance. Many of the squad members who had been training turned their attention toward them. They had never seen Masatsuki Ozaki in this training ground before. And now, seeing him bring a beautiful girl inside, curiosity spread among them. Wasn't Ozaki 3rd Seat afraid that the commander-in-chief would be angry if she found out? In the crowd, a short, chubby young man with short black hair, who didn't seem much older than Suifeng, watched the scene unfold with a look of impatience. Don't break anything, or our family will have to pay for the repairs. Marino Omeda smacked the boy on the head. You brat, all you ever think about is money. Pay attention. Don't underestimate people. Even I wouldn't dare say I could definitely beat Masatsuki. The chubby boy clutched his head, eyes wide with surprise. His father's strength had been recognized by the head of the Shioin clan. The Omega family had held the position of lieutenant of the 2nd Division for generations, not just because of their wealth but because each generation produced individuals with the talent to join the Onmitsukido. And his father, Marinoshin Omeda, was a rare genius within the family. Marinoshin smirked. If only this kid had more ambition. But he knew that was wishful thinking. This brat only cared about money and food, who even taught him to be like this? He shook his head, causing the large gold chain around his neck to jangle. Meanwhile, seeing that Masatsuki Ozaki had no intention of attacking, Su Ifeng made a decision. She would strike first and teach this villain, who had stolen Lady Yoruichi's heart, a lesson. Su Ifeng took a deep breath, shifted her stance, and in the blink of an eye, vanished. As expected of someone raised in the Feng family, trained in non-Mitsu Kido from childhood, her flash steps was executed with impressive precision. She disappeared in an instant, reappearing right in front of Masatsuki Ozaki the next second. With a flick of her right hand, cold steel gleamed. At some point, the Zanpakutō that had been at her waist was now in her grip. As an assassin-type Shinigami, Su Ifeng specialized in close-quarters combat. She struck swiftly and fiercely, refusing to give Masatsuki even a chance to counter. Her Zanpakutō was small and compact, and every slash and thrust demonstrated the danger of a shorter blade, speed and precision over brute force. Masatsuki had to admit, her assassination technique was excellent. Unfortunately, against overwhelming strength, these slashes barely qualified as attacks. No matter how tricky her angles were or how lethal her strikes seemed, without sufficient speed and power, it was meaningless. Besides, it was clear that while she disliked him, she had no intention of actually killing him. Though her blade aimed for vital spots, the angles were slightly off. Her strikes lacked the force that should have accompanied her spiritual pressure level. It was obvious she was holding back. Even if her attacks landed, they wouldn't be fatal. Masatsuki didn't believe for a second that a professionally trained assassin couldn't control her own strength. This wasn't a serious assassination attempt. She had simply heard rumors, believed she had lost her beloved, and in her frustration, was venting her emotions, yet in the end, she couldn't bring herself to truly hurt him. She's surprisingly gentle. Masatsuki suddenly found her even more endearing. Su Ifeng's pupils shrank. In her disbelieving gaze, Masatsuki smiled and effortlessly grabbed her wrist. To avoid accidentally hurting her fragile spiritual pressure, he applied only a controlled amount of force. This girl was still young, yet her strength and speed already surpassed many executive militia members. But Masatsuki remained completely at ease as he pressed down on her sword hand before letting go. "Do you want to continue?" He scratched his head and smiled. "If so, go all out. I am the third seat, after all. You don't have to worry about hurting me." Su Ifeng nodded. She seemed calmer now, but she didn't back down. With unwavering resolve, she raised her blade and charged at him again. Now, she genuinely wanted to see how strong Masatsuki Ozaki was. Flashes of steel filled the air. The battle had only just begun, yet the intensity had already reached its peak. Their clash grew fiercer with each exchange, drawing the full attention of the watching squad members. After another rapid sequence of slashes, Masatsuki casually extended a single finger and lightly tapped the side of her blade. A simple motion. Yet in that instant, Su Ifeng completely lost control of her Zanpakutō. With a sharp clang, the blade was sent flying, and the training ground fell silent. Su Ifeng's expression grew serious. She now understood, this man's strength was far beyond ordinary. From start to finish, he had remained utterly composed. He hadn't even drawn his Zanpakutō or used hand-to-hand combats, yet he had effortlessly suppressed her the entire time. The gap between them was like the difference between heaven and earth. She briefly considered abandoning her sword and switching to hand-to-hand combats for close combat instead. But before she could act, Masatsuki stepped forward, placed a hand on her shoulder, and spoke in a calm, encouraging tone. "You did well. You're more than qualified to serve as Yoruichi's personal guard. However, your swordsmanship still has some flaws. The coordination between your blade work and footwork could use improvement." Chapter 97, Masked Monster. At that moment, Masatsuki Ozaki seemed almost possessed by Retsu Anohana. Just as Anohana had once done during a sword art class at the Shino Academy, he pointed out each flaw in Su Ifeng's combat technique with precise clarity. The onlookers mentally reenacted the battle between the two and quickly realized that Masatsuki was absolutely right, prompting murmurs of amazement. As she listened to him highlight her weaknesses and offer solutions, Su Ifeng's sharp eyes lit up, only to dim again a moment later. "If this man is my rival, how can I possibly remain by Lady Yoruichi's side?" As soon as their sparring match ended, several team members clenched their fists in anticipation, itching to challenge him next. Unlike their more laid-back superior, these members were brimming with motivation. Masatsuki, however, had no interest in them whatsoever, his expression making it clear that he found the idea bothersome. He was willing to humor Su Ifeng because she was Su Ifeng, but as for the rest, they could find something else to do. Scratching his head, he absent-mindedly grabbed Su Ifeng's hand and glanced toward the mountains northwest of the barracks. "The training ground tour is over. Let's head to the nest of maggots. There's a newcomer there, the most powerful and most cowardly criminal in its history." "Powerful?" Cowardly? How do those two words even go together? Su Ifang tilted her head in confusion, momentarily forgetting to pull her hand away from his grasp. The moment they stepped out of the exclusive training ground for the third seat, they were immediately surrounded by an eager crowd of squad members. Fortunately, with Morinoshi no Meda's help, Masatsuki and Su Ifang managed to slip away from the overly enthusiastic group. After leaving the 2nd Division barracks, they made their way through the moat and dense forest, eventually arriving at the nest of maggots. Jinikamaru was already there, waiting. When he noticed the unfamiliar girl at Masatsuki's side, his expression remained unchanged, calm and indifferent. As always, he was used to this. This isn't exactly an ideal spot for a date, Jin quipped. If you're trying to charm a little girl, you should take her to the noble district instead. With your noble status, the 10th Division won't bother arresting you. In the past, the 10th Division wouldn't have dared to provoke a noble. But under a captain dead set on making his mark, that might not be the case anymore. Masatsuki pondered this briefly before turning his gaze towards Su Ifang, who was a short distance away, storing her Zanpakutō. Her petite frame certainly gave her a youthful appearance, but from their time traveling together, he was certain she was already an adult, just still in the middle of growing. Though Masatsuki didn't quite understand how someone could be both fully grown and still developing at the same time. But whatever. If Su Ifang said so, then it must be true. After all, she was both cool and adorable, who was he to argue? Gesturing for her to follow, he casually waved to Jin before stepping into the underground prison that housed the most dangerous criminals. The prisoners, as always, exuded menace, but Masatsuki had long since lost interest in them. With little effort, he swatted away any who dared to get too close. Su Ifang could clearly sense the prisoners' spiritual pressure, and the sheer power radiating from them left her stunned. It wasn't just the strength of these criminals that shocked her, it was the way Masatsuki moved through this place as if it were his own backyard. And the most unsettling part? He had been suppressing his spiritual pressure the entire time. The realization made the whole situation feel almost surreal. Pushing open the heavy prison doors, they arrived at Takasugi Hirofumi's cell. The sheer durability of his confinement and the appalling conditions within were far beyond what was standard for a prisoner in the nest of maggots. There were no torture devices scattered around, no grisly instruments of pain, just an empty space, barren except for the chains and shackles binding him to the wall. Immobile, restrained in a way that would surely drive a person mad over the course of 3,000 years. Masatsuki, however, remained completely unfazed. He didn't even acknowledge the prisoner's piercing stare, merely leaning against the wall with a nonchalant air. Then, with a flick of his fingers, he unlatched the metal mask covering Takasugi's face. Long time no see, Takasugi. Or perhaps I should address you by your full name, Takasugi Hirofumi. This cell of yours is downright miserable. Not even a place to sit. Maybe we should install a sofa outside so I can drop by more often. What do you think? Hey. It doesn't matter. I'll be out soon anyway. By then, you'll be the one staring at the walls. Or maybe you won't even have the luxury of sitting here and doing that. Takasugi Hirofumi let out a chilling laugh, his expression twisted in an attempt to kill with his glare. But even his threats sounded hollow, utterly lacking menace. A man who could barely move a finger, how was he supposed to be intimidating? Seeing Masatsuki Ozaki standing there, looking down on him with that arrogant expression, Takasugi snapped, his fury boiling over as he shouted, "Why the hell are you here? Are you here to kill me? Don't forget who's backing me, you can't just do as you please. Just looking at you pisses me off. Do me a favor and get the hell out of my sight." Maybe he didn't realize it himself, but by the end, his words sounded more like a plea than a threat. If anyone familiar with Takasugi Hirofumi saw the trace of fear in his voice as he faced Masatsuki, they would no doubt mock him mercilessly. Then again, anyone who knew him even a little was well aware that, at his core, Takasugi was a coward. His reaction was hardly surprising. After all, Masatsuki Ozaki, a young man thousands of years his junior, had nearly cost him his life not long ago. Even Takasugi's stronger colleagues had fallen at Masatsuki's hands. To the unfortunate Takasugi Hirofumi, Masatsuki wasn't some prize to be hunted for glory, he was a plague to be avoided at all costs. All he could do was pray that Masatsuki would grow bored and leave of his own accord. Of course, there was no doubt that someone would come to rescue him. Until then, he had no intention of dying a meaningless death. Masatsuki, completely unaware of Takasugi's frantic inner thoughts, and even if he was, he wouldn't have cared, simply looked at him with wide, innocent eyes. "Come on, no need to get so worked up, Takasugi-san. I'm not some villainous monster. Why would I kill you?" He stepped closer, a bright, friendly smile plastered across his face. "Relax. We've got plenty of time ahead of us. To take things slow and have some fun." Takasugi's whole body trembled. A chilling dread spread through him as a vision of Rentaro's gruesome demise flickered through his mind like a film reel. Suifeng's eyes widened in disbelief. Takasugi Hirofumi's spiritual pressure was undoubtedly kept in class, so why was he this terrified after just a few words from Masatsuki? She still didn't know that Rentaro, a captain like Takasugi, had already met his end at Masatsuki's hands. If she did, she might have understood Takasugi's fear a little better. Masatsuki turned away and called out, "Alright, Takasugi-san, we've got other people to see. We'll be heading out now." "You bastard. Do you take me for some kind of performer here for your amusement?" Takasugi snarled through clenched teeth. Masatsuki ignored his outburst. With a flick of his fingers, the metal mask snapped back into place, sealing Takasugi's mouth once more. Then, without looking back, he walked off with Suifeng, making his way to another cell. It was time to show this inexperienced little girl his prized collection of masked monsters.